Good evening and welcome to Speakers Corner UK. As always, I'm back with my trusty co-host, Stop Spamming. Good evening, sir. How are you?
Hello world, going well. Why are there no people here? Why didn't they anticipate that we were going to come here today on this beautiful Wednesday, half past whatever? Why didn't they anticipate and send out a warning? Listen, it's going to be Rob and Stops looking at Islam.
Yeah, I guess we just never know when we're going to do it. If we could plan it ahead of time, we'd probably get a lot more views, but it is what it is. So welcome to the
You're not allowed
joiners
to
who are
say
just
that
joining us.
anymore. This is now a what is it? Not allowed to say it is what it is. That is now a Trumpism, and you're not allowed to say that.
All right. Okay. It isn't what it is then.
It isn't what it is not.
Yeah, the opposite. Welcome, everybody, to this fourth and hopefully final part of our review of the Answering Atheist Part 2 from, I guess it's Hamza's Den, wherever it was. And this part we'll be listening in,
Oh, look,
reviewing,
there's
and
somebody there. Pio, hi.
critiquing Part 4 with T-Jump. So T-Jump joins this time, and we'll hear what he's got to say now. So as we remember from Part 3, we had Monkfish on, and we went through that with a fine-tooth comb, and he did a great job of exposing Sabur, and I've learned something new from that as well. Well, obviously, there's always things to learn, but the Motte and Bailey fallacy, which is something I got from Monkfish. And essentially what this is, and this comes from somebody that coined it in the 19th century, or even later than that, 20th century, not 19th, I'm thinking in the 1900s, as in like late 1900s, 1980 or whatever it was. And it refers to the Motte and Bailey is like I think it's an English saying, so where you had a village that had a wall around it, which was like, it was called the Motte. And then higher up on a hill, that was the Bailey, I think, if I remember correctly. This Bailey was this thing that had a wall and it had a village, and higher up on a hill that was much harder to access and better to defend, they had the Motte. And so when villages were attacked, and if they couldn't defend, they'd retreat to the Motte, they'd move from the Bailey to the Motte and defend that position. And the reason that we're bringing this up, and why this was actually one of the fallacies from last week, or from the last part, was what Sabur was doing, right? Defending two different positions and jumping between them as if they were the same position. So when he's challenged on the weaker position, he retreats to the stronger position as if that's what he's suddenly defending. But when he's not under pressure or somebody's not being critiqued, then they jump to what would be a stronger claim, but it's more difficult to defend. So the stronger claim, difficult to defend, is the Bailey, and the weaker claim, easier to defend, is the Motte. And so this jumping between these two is what we saw in the previous part, and that's the Motte and Bailey fallacy. I don't remember the gentleman's name that done it, but thanks to Monkfish for pointing out that particular one. It's something now that I won't forget. If you go to the Gin and Tonic Discord server, if you need an invite, Stops can put it. I'm on my phone, so Stops will be driving and running the video, and I'll be shouting stop every so often. But if you want to see more about that, go to the Gin and Tonic Discord server. In there, in the general chat, is a little bit of information about the Motte and Bailey fallacy. So with that, shall we get started, sir?
Yes, can do. And by the way, I realized that this reading ahead and everything is not actually a requirement, because I noticed that we pick up almost anything anyway. It's only nice if you can say, okay, keep this in mind now, because this is going to come back and haunt him later. Those are the nice things. But other than that, I think we're pretty good at picking up most of the things that are going wrong, at least so far, what I have noticed. So anyway, for the last part, I'm going to pick up my notes, because I did make some. And
Excellent.
We are going to go to the end. So this is the end of Monkfish and then the beginning of T-Jump.
Laters.
Thank you. Wish you all the best, Monkfish.
You know, the thing is, Hamza, look, you know when
Wait,
people...
Tom. Wait, Tom. Hold your keep your powder dry.
Yeah, you know, people like Monkfish, when they start throwing out insults, don't throw them out. That's when he's stuck. So when you threw him out, he's basically trying to get out of that situation. And a few times he tried to do this. And what's very important for us to do is, I'm not interested, and like the other guy, what's his name? J-Mike, whatever. Or Monkfish tried to come up with some nuances. I'm not interested in, nor is any of us interested in just generally talking about what a particular atheist believes or doesn't believe.
I have to stop here because, okay, this is exactly the point, because I've listened to this and wrote this down. Famous last words, because he says he's not interested what an atheist believes or doesn't believe, and later he laments that atheists don't talk in general about what they believe or don't believe.
And he's
But he
also,
could-
if we remember from part 1, right, in the intro, he said, hey, we're going to make these claims and we want atheists to come on and challenge us on these things, right? And so if an atheist comes on and challenges you and says, hey, that's either not what most atheists believe or it's not what I believe, then that's fine. You can either not have them on, or you can, essentially attack a straw man or a weak position and then pat yourself on the back. If I went in and challenged them on, the Shia view, they're going to say, well, I don't hold that view. And if I, overcome the Shia view, pat myself on the back, they're going to look at me as if I've done nothing, to challenge their particular views. So it's all very well. But then again, he's also confused about this whole new atheist thing, because that's his little hobby horse. Little does he know that, it's not something that necessarily people hold to. And even as we read in the philosophical, what do you call it? Stanford Encyclopedia, there isn't anything particular about it other than it was attributed to the Four Horsemen. But those views have been expressed before. So, and there are stronger intellectual positions than, for example, Dawkins and so forth. Anyway, so, but if that's your hobby, or if that's the best you can do, good luck, and then pat yourself on the back. Don't go after the strongest people, because you wouldn't stand a chance, right? Go after somebody who's popular, who might not be the strongest argument. But if you think you're going to defeat that as in like get atheists to question their beliefs, then you got another thing coming.
Yeah, and I'm definitely not the strongest, but still, they're so scared of me even. It's unbelievable.
What we're doing is we're critiquing this new atheist movement, right?
Again, I don't know if anybody has listened to it. Last time we said, that, number one, a new atheist is actually quite stupid, and there's no movement as such. It's just that we are living in a day and age where you're allowed to talk as an atheist, which you weren't allowed to do for the last 2,000 years.
And if we're going to talk about their views, then we're going to go to their books. And one thing that...
Their books? What are the books of an atheist? I mean, you substitute atheist for vegetarian or vegan. And then you see how ridiculous this whole thing is.
I think what he's doing there, stops. I think what he's doing is saying, hey, I'm going to subserve people under new atheism. And because the new atheists wrote some books, I'm going to critique those. And I'm going to find a couple of weak points in these books. And I'm going to make as if this is the central argument of the book, which of course it isn't. And then I'm going to attack that. I'm going to cherry pick a few people who disagree with Dawkins, because he's supposedly the prophet. That just shows exactly, as you pointed out, how poor the reasoning and thinking is. So I'm going to go after that. And then I'm going to, suggest to myself and pat myself on the back and tell all my followers that I've done a good job. And this is the bankruptcy of at least, this sort of line of critique. It's, very weak, to say the least, if we're charitable.
Yeah. And he's just been shown. I mean, he's the loudest. He makes the most noise. But he's just been shown that he's clueless. He's just been shown that he doesn't know what he's talking about. And yet he doesn't learn. He still does it. I don't know why.
Absolutely hate and cannot stand is the sort of things which I just pointed out, which is, how is it that if you guys really do represent science and you think you're at the fore...
I get so mad. He's been told, they had an entire stream only on this topic. And he has been told, no, an atheist does not believe gods exist, not because of science. This is not the only thing that leads somebody like me. He asked me, do you take it? No, Hamza asked me, do you take it that evolution or something? I said, no, this is not the sole criteria. There are so many other things, and yet they are saying it again and again. It seems as though they cannot process the information. If somebody says, no, that is not the case, they will just repeat the same. It's like a reset in the brain where they go back to the previous condition, regardless of what you've just told them. They can't compute.
Yeah, well, I think some other people, like we heard on the previous part, do accept that evolution can make you an intellectually fulfilled atheist, and that science does lean towards or lead you towards atheism. Certainly doesn't lead you towards theism. So that's the claim of Dawkins and many other people. Now, you might not have that view, that's fine, but I think that's what he's going for. But even if he's challenging that, the overwhelming majority of atheists accept that, and some of the people that he actually quotes as if, they're challenging Dawkins, but on that central point, they're in agreement with Dawkins. So bringing these people up on the Mott and Bailey fallacy, the Bailey part now is, you can be intellectually fulfilled. And when that's challenged and overrun, retreat to, well, they're critiquing Dawkins on his confusion or, conflation of philosophical and methodological naturalism. And that's a safe position because they are actually doing that. But that's a weak argument, and that's not the argument, as we saw in the previous video at the very end, that he himself brought up, right? Which was this whole thing that you should be consistent and not be intellectually fulfilled as an atheist. But in fact, all of the people that he quotes, almost all of them, do accept that that's the position. So, yeah.
Yeah, and this is what Heisenberg just brings up. Hi, and thank you for this. Yes, a lot of people, US citizens, are not able to compute that the election is not over on one day. It is not a matter of, there's a run in, and then once the last runner is in, then this is over. No, you first need to go and evaluate the data. The voting is done, but the counting still continues, and it will continue for maybe a week or two. But a lot of people don't understand this because there's this Trump guy who's saying, no, I need the result today. Like, he doesn't understand. He's not able to get into his head that the voting, that an election does not consist of only one day. The voting, that the time that all the votes must be cast, that is at the end of one day. But now it goes into the counting period, and people can't understand this. They're all saying, yeah, but why don't we know who's the president? Well, because not everything's being counted. And people cannot grasp that. And this is the same situation here. They cannot grasp that because somebody tells them you don't need to. And this is the problem. So there's a huge failure here in the brain, in the thinking process.
Of in the new enlightenment or whatever you call it, how is it that major figures criticize you guys so severely? And that's...
No, there are no major figures criticizing us guys. There is no groupthink here. We are not part of a community or something. We're starting to develop this because we realize that there are some common factors or some commonalities, and that all of a sudden we're allowed to talk about it, but that is it. It is not that Rob and I sit together and we discuss atheism or something like this. That's not on. It's not the same as Islam. I don't know why he can't understand that, really.
That's why he was not happy to admit the Massimo criticism, and he was not happy to admit the Rus criticism.
But what I thought, though, is if he's saying you were wrong about this, that, the other, and it's a very simple format, what he said, how you're wrong about it. So he says you were wrong about this, Massimo, Flex, and Dawkins, but then he admitted, yeah, he did say that, and then he tried to challenge what Massimo said. Oh,
okay, should we explain this? No, you just did. This is exactly the point, that they can't understand that the criticism that is against Professor Dawkins is on the level of the philosophy, but his book is not a philosophical book. It's on biology. So what Massimo and everybody else is doing, they are agreeing with the biology of Professor Dawkins. But there are some philosophers who are saying it is not philosophically sound or valid, or I don't know what you want to call it. And that is correct, because it's not intended to be. He is just giving you the facts in biology, not in philosophy. And they are continuously critiquing the philosophy. And the other people are not criticizing that. Why can't you, I don't know, why don't they understand that there are two different things? I mean, Monkfish explained this, I don't know, 15 times? I don't know how many times. And they still don't understand it.
you're doing, don't shoot the messenger, mate. I'm just quoting what your mate Massimo said. That's all I'm
No, you're misrepresenting.
doing.
Yeah.
And your beef is with Massimo and what he thinks. Wait, I'm just telling you what he said. How am I a liar if Massimo got it wrong? If he got it wrong. Anyway, Tom, just so you know the format, because it went everywhere last time, and leave the vegetarian eagles. Yeah. Basically, just if you've heard anything today that you disagree with, just tell us what you've heard, why you disagree with it. Yeah, so we can just keep it. We're talking about the history of science. If you accept that Islam isn't opposed to science, we can move on to the Darwinian evolution flex, if you like. Go on, Sam. The floor's yours.
Yeah, sure. So there's two things I was really interested in. One is when Imran mentioned that methodological naturalism can't make supernatural claims, and that's not actually true. It totally can. There's no problem with that at all. Methodological naturalism says that no supernatural claims are justified yet, but that doesn't exclude them as a possibility at all. In fact, there's a huge base of published papers in academia on parapsychology for supernatural things. So methodological naturalism does not in any way exclude the supernatural.
And how many people
Well,
need to tell
there's a
him
whole
this?
bunch of definitions of methodological naturalism. There isn't just one definition, but the predominating way that it's operating is in that way, that there is
He's just been told it's not. He's just been told it's not, and he still says, yes, it is. I don't understand.
really nothing supernatural. So if, for example, I try and come up with the idea that, we're studying something in neuroscience, and I have a hypothesis, and my hypothesis is there's actually a soul from the Islamic or Christian perspective, that would be thrown out completely from a practical point of view.
No.
If I was to make the claim that actually,
Stop it there for a moment.
there is a
Okay, that's complete nonsense, right? They've even tried to test for this. So this is utter and complete bollocks, because they tested when people were, supposedly dying. And, if it's the case that you have a soul or a spirit or whatever the case is, and it floats out of the body, as some people have the mythical idea about, then they put the numbers on top of these cupboards, right? That if the soul floated out and could see everything, because that's what people claim to report, that they can see their bodies from floating up above it, then they would be able to, read off these numbers and know this. So they were put in random places where nobody knew about, in the event that this could happen, right? Because there is a testable claim. If in fact you can do this and nobody knows about this, and the only way it could happen is if the soul floated free of the body and was able to visually pick this information up and then reattach itself in some inexplicable way to the body. Now we would have evidence in favor of something that leaves the body, is able to read things and come back into the body. So this is complete nonsense.
a God, and God is actually interfering in the universe, and things are being run by God directly. If I was to make any of these metaphysical claims practically, and I was somewhere, I would be absolutely shot down. So what we need to do is we need to understand, look, I as a Muslim, I have no problem with working within the parameters of methodological naturalism. My biggest problem is when people use the fact that we have methodological naturalism to try and come up with the conclusion that therefore philosophical naturalism is true.
Why? Where does he get this from? These are two different versions which have very different approaches. You can't use the one to go and say, you need to prove it right. Why? Where do you get this from?
I think the confusion for him is that he thinks that if methodological naturalism can be shown to weigh against God, then people can say, oh, well, God doesn't exist. And to a degree, I think they can, in the sense that if there's claims made that God did X or Y in this universe, and we find no evidence, or we find evidence to the opposite, to the contrary of that, then we can say that the claims made about this God doing X is therefore not true. And if part of the claims is that this God existed because he did X, Y, and Z, then that can lead us to the view that, no, this God does not exist based on the claims or based on the evidence against the claims made that this God did. Now, if he's going to retreat to the position of, well, hey, you can never disprove it completely, well, that's a complete red herring. Nobody's claiming that you can, quote, completely dismiss it, or that it's, quote, a capital F or capital T truth or fact of the matter. What we're saying is it's reliably the case that God does not exist. And that's something, again, you've got to, somebody speaking to him at least, or anybody else has got to make abundantly clear. Otherwise, they'll use the Motte and Bailey and jump between different ideas, philosophical or layman speak, and conflate the two together. So I think we've got to be quite careful and make it clear to him what is actually going on here.
I think that's a fallacy, as Massimo points out. And since...
Okay, he's harping on this, Massimo. Now, okay.
I mean, we've covered it, though, haven't we? Quite clearly.
Well, I looked at this specific one. And I found that they had a 3-day workshop on this. And then he says 3 main ideas emerge from this unusual gathering. Number 1, there is no sensible philosophy that is not a naturalistic philosophy. Number 2, there is disagreement on the issue of reductionism. And there is disagreement on the implications of naturalism for crucial philosophical questions, particularly concerning morality and free will. So there's a distinction to be made between ontological reductionism, in other words, dealing with the nature of existence, and epistemic reductionism, dealing with the knowledge of what exists. So this is what Massimo wrote. And this is something that, in my eyes, is very, very clear, that there is nothing in here that would correspond with what Sabur thinks what Massimo is saying. So he does not understand what Massimo is saying. He does not understand that he is agreeing with the biology, and all he has to say is, okay, we need to go and look at different factors here from a philosophical point of view. But even Sabur says that in philosophy, everything is up for grabs. You can discuss a lot of things. So there's nothing absolute or done or whatever in this topic. So there's a lot of things that you still need discussing. So all that Sabur is doing is just crying like a little girl and saying, well, yeah, you've tested it, but the test was stupid and it didn't test for God. And you tell him, well, yes, it did, and you can show this. And Rob has just pointed it out several times that this indeed does exactly that. And then he says, well, no, it doesn't. And then he repeats everything. So
the other thing that obviously he's quite famous for is cherry picking some philosopher or whatever that agrees with him. As you pointed out, there's a great deal of disagreement on virtually every topic in philosophy. And it's easy to pick one philosopher on your side and then make as if that's somehow a knockdown or some strong argument against the other position. And all you have to do is find somebody that says the opposite. What now? Right, but he banks on people not having somebody to counter him, because all he's doing is appealing to a cherry-picked person to try and back up his point. And they said, "Oh, you're arguing with him," as if it's now he's dishonestly stepped back from this and say, "Oh, you just argue with. I'm just quoting him," as if the guy he's quoting is somehow the last word on the topic. And then, as you quite rightly point out, he contradicts himself when it's under pressure, and in fact agrees that there's a great deal of discussion in all these topics, and people have conflicting views on almost all of these topics anyway. So appealing to, but again, remember what this is about. This is about appealing to his gullible and ignorant audience who barely know how to spell philosophy, let alone know anything about it. And as long as their man sounds like he knows what he's talking about, and he quote minds somebody's name, they're not going to look it up. They're not going to care what the guy actually says or even understand it. But if it sounds like this guy agrees with Sabur, well, somehow that's a strong argument in their favor. And of course, this is what we always talk about, the lack of critical thinking, especially with most Muslims. They're told what to think and not how to think. And so when something like this happened, and we, very well, I think, took this apart in the previous section review of this video, and we're just going to do it again with the same thing. But we're going to point out that he's not appealing to us or anybody that's thinking critically, right? He's appealing to his gullible sheep. And so they just take the bait and they're hypnotized like it's a Darren Brown show.
And don't understand what is actually going on here, unfortunately. They will say, yeah, T-Jump has just been owned. He should go and cry or something like this. They don't understand that it's Sabur who is embarrassing himself again and again and again and again. Unbelievable. And Hamza pats him on the back and says, oh, you're the expert.
Last time as well, you introduced yourself as a new Muslim, new atheist. Just to make sure that we're all on the same page, we are going to be talking about new atheism today. Yeah, we're not going to be talking about like what any particular person believes or all the rest.
Well, if you're talking about new atheists and new atheists don't exist, what the hell are you going to talk about?
Well, the question to ask him, of
course, something that he labels as new atheist, that's it, but nobody else agrees with him. So
but immediately, the first question to ask is here, what do you mean by new atheism and why should I accept that? And now he might again cherry pick somebody and say, Professor Doodly Dots said this about new atheism. And then all I do is open up the Stanford Encyclopedia and say, hey, here's what they say. I'm going to go with that. So you haven't got a case here. You want to cherry pick it and attack a straw man, be my guest, pat yourself on the back, appeal to your gullible followers. But nobody who's thinking clearly or paying attention is in any way remotely moved. And in fact, you're doing yourself a disservice, because we're going to take you less and less seriously when you do this, because it's so blatantly obvious what's going on here.
Yeah.
All right, cool.
All right, so yeah, that's just simply false. There are
Imran, how would
actually-
you respond? Sorry, Tom. How would you respond to Tom's claim to you, Imran, that you're wrong?
So that for me, this is quite interesting actually, because often people cite things like prayer experiments,
Yes.
and similarly with the paranormal experiments.
Yes.
Now, the problem actually for me is, and again, non-philosophical background, but what you need to posit is actually some method of causation or some effect that's happening. So something is going on that's linked to an effect that you're seeing, an observation, and you
Yes.
have to evidence that.
That's what
And
happened.
there is no causation that you can point to. So something that you can look at and examine and say, this is how this is happening in those experiments. So people maybe people are writing about this stuff, but it's not how science as we understand it is done in generally speaking in everything else. So it's like taking a sort of an esoteric thing that some people are doing and saying, look, we're doing this. Some people are looking at ghosts, for example. That means science can look at the supernatural. It doesn't unless it can propose a method or some way of a causation happening that this is what's going on.
You have been explained how
So
this
science.
happened.
So what does science do? It looks at observations and it gives you an explanation of how this is happening. And the theories that are posited are always based on natural explanations. So there is no, as far as I've heard of some of these, and I think that they're mostly ridiculed in the scientific world and not taken seriously at all. So you can use that as an example, but I don't think it's valid. Tom.
All right, Tom. Next point.
No, I'm still on that one. So what you guys said is just patently false. Like all of those have methodological papers where they give an actual do this method to get this result kind of a system for parapsychology and for souls and for brains. You can find these examples in academic journals all the time.
Yeah.
No one in methodological naturalism at all excludes the supernatural. It's just not a thing. Methodological naturalism is only using things that have already been verified as a basis for reasonable conclusions. But if you want to put in something new, that's perfectly fine. You just need an experimental result to justify it. So methodological naturalism does not in any way exclude the supernatural at all. Like all of these things are perfectly reasonable to put forth as hypotheses if you can justify it with a testable result. And so this.
Wow, this is excellent phraseology, by the way. I love this too. Like really very precise, very normal, brilliantly said. 100%.
Okay, and I think the other good thing about this as well is that whether it's ridiculed because the conclusions don't follow from the hypothesis, that's one thing. But is it ridiculed with the methodology of undertaking an investigation of this? And no, I don't think it is. And if somebody wants to claim that is, by all means, bring them on. Let's hear what they've got to say. But there's a difference between ridiculing the conclusion, i.e. that the supernatural exists because of this, because the link is likely not there, and ridiculing the actual methodology. So there's two different things. One is the methodology, one is the conclusion. And I would probably agree that the conclusions are more likely ridiculed than the actual methodology.
Exactly, yeah.
Soul, no problem. Parapsychology, no problem. Rupert Sheldrake is one proponent who puts it forth quite rigorously in many academic journals. Like methodological naturalism doesn't in any way exclude the supernatural.
Just stop it there again. We just got to remind ourselves of something. He's put forward a good example in the sense that Rupert Sheldrake is somebody that's some sort of academic in his own way. Whether he's ridiculed for his views is different from whether he's ridiculed for putting forward a methodology for it. I'd probably be very critical of whatever he's putting forward, but I wouldn't be critical of it if the methodology is one that fits within, the scientific method. I'd probably be far more critical of whether he's actually getting the conclusion that he claims or he's looking for or whatever the case is. But again, we've just got to remind ourselves, he's now given an example, and unfortunately this will take us off on a tangent. We've got to be so careful of giving examples. They need to provide the evidence. When Imran said, hey, it's not really accepted, where's your evidence of that, right? We've got to keep asking, where's your evidence? Because these guys make claim after claim. As soon as Tom makes a claim or adds some support, then they go after it, right? So this becomes a lopsided thing of Tom constantly having to justify his claims and they're not having to justify anything, as if this is the last word, or they've really read deeply on this and it's just a fact of the matter. And so we and Tom and everybody else have got to get into the habit of saying, provide the evidence.
Yeah, good point, yeah.
Okay, so let me propose a theory. So I'm going to propose a theory for you.
Sorry,
Sorry, go on.
can I just just one second. So the thing is, T-Jump, we can't use people like Rupert Sheldrake because they're just like absolutely ridiculed. People don't take them seriously.
Who cares?
Now, when it comes to this particular thing, which I was saying earlier, and you're trying to say methodological naturalism allows supernatural explanations. I just want to read out something from Pigliucci here. This is Science and Society, Science and Fundamentalism, published in 2005. And he's talking here about Dawkins, but it goes over some very important points. The fallacy, and he's talking about here the God delusion, the fallacy lies in the fact that most people, including alas prominent science popularizers such as Richard Dawkins, do not make the subtle but crucial distinction between methodological and philosophical naturalism. Naturalism, broadly speaking, is the idea that there is only nature and that the supernatural realm and phenomena do not exist. As a philosophical position, it has a long history of elaboration and debate. Philosophical naturalism then is the strong metaphysical position that there is, as a matter of fact, no such thing as a supernatural nor a higher being, which obviously characterizes any individual who considers themselves to be an atheist. Methodological naturalism, however, is a metaphysically more modest claim. It takes the position that while there may be a supernatural realm or being, it does not enter and does not need to be invoked in any discussions of scientific findings.
Do you think he understood what he just read? All I see is Imran nodding. He does not understand what has just been said, because what has just been said confirms everything that we are saying. What Tom has just said, this confirms exactly this, and he doesn't understand it.
So your main sort of narrative that you're trying to come off with today is just absolutely false.
Excuse me, you've just confirmed it. You've just read and you've confirmed what this guy says, and now you're saying everything is wrong. I don't understand.
Yeah, I'm definitely of the view that his intellectual ability is questionable. I was of the view that he was just disingenuous and dishonest. He actually knew what he was talking about. It was purposely obfuscating that position. Now I think he is in fact more on the clueless side, as Monkfish pointed out. Because, and again, right, this is how the brain doesn't sort of track things. Because, firstly, Pigliucci is just one person. There's other people who vehemently disagree. So he's going to, again, make the claim that, hey, because Pigliucci says that, therefore it's false. Did you hear that? Therefore your position is entirely false because one guy said so. No, that's not the case, right? So we'll again highlight that every single time he does this. But number two, he said that it's not necessary. That doesn't mean that it cannot be used. The fact that it's not necessary doesn't mean that it couldn't be the case. But, these nuanced positions, taking a few moments to think about what's actually being said here, appears to not be within his cognitive ability, or at least certainly isn't at the moment. So again, we just move on. The fact that he can then categorically claim that it's false is just, if it wasn't so silly, it'd be laughable.
It's mind-boggling. And does Imran correct him? No. Does Hamza correct him?
No, well, they're utterly clueless as well. So, they're all in the same sort of clueless boat. And because they don't understand what they read and they don't see the nuance in that. And hopefully Tom will point it out. So let's see. Otherwise, or they might just bulldoze over him. Who knows?
Because I like the way that it's worked. I mean, the only reason why he brings Massimo so many times is because he happens to criticize Dawkins on the philosophy. So he has been looking for somebody who is a non-believer who criticizes Dawkins, because he has this thing about Dawkins. He is obsessed with this. So he found somebody who says something where he doesn't agree with something, but he doesn't realize that this is just a minor point. But this is why he's using him, and he doesn't even understand that when this person then says, no, everything is correct, he will still use it because, come on, he said something negative about Dawkins, so everything that he says now should be negative. He doesn't realize that it's more nuanced than this. It's not this black and white thing the way that he has it. Unbelievable.
Methodological naturalism is a distinct thing that we have in science. And philosophical naturalism is not entailed by methodological naturalism. And methodological naturalism limits the hypotheses that you can actually make. And the very fact that you brought out Rupert Sheldrake, right? Rupert Sheldrake he was absolutely attacked by these new atheists. His talk, his TED talk was banned, right? PZ Myers and all these atheists came. The very fact that you had to use a person who's been absolutely shunned and ridiculed and banned to try and make this point shows you're just clutching at straws here. This is a really fringe thing. So
no,
at this point, let's just stop it there for a moment.
If methodological
there,
naturalism,
Yeah, I'm trying.
Okay. Okay, so the immediate question comes to me now is, can you play back to me, and I guarantee you wouldn't, right? He'd sidestep it like Monkfish tried to do, and even J. Mike. Tell me why I brought up Rupert Sheldrake. Was it because I thought that his conclusions was something that was accepted, or was there another reason I brought him up? Can you steelman the position that you think I was bringing up Rupert Sheldrake? And I guarantee you, when put on the spot, as we've seen before, he will shift and slide and slither away from actually dealing with it. So just got to ask somebody like that, when you hear them misrepresenting it or making a claim that you didn't make or that you don't accept, just ask them to steelman your position. And because they don't fully understand it, or if they do, they're just being disingenuous, they won't steelman it, because then the critique that they're leveling wouldn't be effective.
is the way that you just defined it. Oh yeah, everything goes. Yep, you can add everything in there. Why call it methodological naturalism? Why not call it just free for all?
Yes, just dishonest again. Everything goes. What a ridiculously stupid, outright dishonest claim that you can get. I mean, how any Muslim takes this guy serious? It's just getting worse. But every time he opens his mouth, he just puts his foot deeper down his own throat, and it's becoming almost a joke now. With regards to taking seriously anything he says, as if Tom said anything goes. Tom was very clear about what he said. You and I agree. Most people did. Well, I won't say most people. There's some who disagree, and we would have to ask Pigliucci directly. Does it entail, Professor Pigliucci, the case with methodological naturalism, that it is impossible to investigate in principle something that may have a supernatural cause? And if he says no, and he justifies that, then we've got somebody who says no, and I'm going, okay, that's cool. Sean Carroll, for example, and others, and myself and many others disagree with that. And so why aren't you going to take our position? Why are you going to cherry pick that position? Because if you think it's stronger, make the argument. At the moment, you haven't remotely done that.
But I've quoted him. This is what he himself wrote. So I don't know why he doesn't understand this. Why doesn't he read what it says there? Why does he jump to conclusions? I don't know. I can't understand why anybody, I mean, Muslim,
I think we've got to just stick with it.
Why don't they find this?
I think, Stops, we've got to, because otherwise we'll drive ourselves batty. I think we've just got to stick with the content. I think, going to their state of mind, and I've done it as well in this particular one, but I think that will make the stream run twice as long and we'll get more frustrated. So we just deal with the content and show where they're either, clueless or mistaken or, invoking some fallacy or other, because if we're going to try and, bang our heads why they're being the way they are, we're just not going to get anywhere, I don't think.
I'm appealing to Muslims to please go and think and show something that is correct what Sabur is saying.
Why it's called methodological naturalism, as in we're going to go for natural effects and natural causes, and I hope this...
No, there is a method.
Quotation from Pigliucci makes it clearer.
Actually, no, it completely agrees with me. I don't think you understood it. So the reason that methodological naturalism only allows for naturalistic explanations is because only naturalistic explanations have ever been verified. So the reason we're excluding the supernatural...
Exactly.
Only naturalistic explanations have ever been verified.
Yes.
Yeah.
So when you make a claim like that, you're basically saying that supernatural explanations have never been verified, or that science allows supernatural explanations to be verified.
Yes, it does.
That's a different
quite
thing.
Simple. That's why I mentioned all of the academic papers. And Rupert Sheldrake, people's personal opinion of him doesn't matter. He had published academic papers. If you have published academic papers, that means they are taking it seriously. They're not retracted.
So can I just want to come very so Rupert Sheldrake was an author. He wasn't a scientist, and he did some research into parapsychology, and it's called pseudoscience. This is actually what it's referred to, generally rejected by the scientific community. Now, let me give you a theory. I was about to propose a theory for you. Yeah. So, if you take any phenomena, let's just take gravity for example. Yeah. And if you said, okay, the way that gravity works is when you drop, say you drop a ball and it hits the ground, there are these unseen gremlins that are grabbing onto this ball, and it's yanking it down into the ground. Okay, what's my evidence for this, proposing this theory? Is, well, actually, if you take as many observations as you like and take this ball anywhere you like and you drop the ball and it's happening, and this is the theory that I'm proposing for it, how are you going to verify that or falsify that? How are you going to do that?
You would make novel testable predictions. So you'd say, if the gremlins are there, then you could pray to the gremlins and have it go left, or pray to the gremlins and have it go right.
No, you're taking the theory somewhere where it isn't. The theory is that the reason the ball is falling is that gremlins are holding on to some substance within the ball and then bringing it down to the ground. Any gravitational phenomena that you come across, so orbiting planets, etc., light bending around other objects, this is these gremlins that are grabbing hold of these particles and they're bending them around, and this is what's causing this to happen. Now, I want you to tell me if you can verify that.
Does he not understand what he is doing? He's setting up an unfalsifiable structure here. You can't verify the gremlins. What are you supposed to do? You're saying, okay, I've just defined something into existence which is undetectable, which is a replacement for my God, and which is the identical same thing what he is claiming about his God, and then saying, how come you're not looking for that?
Okay, but what we can do here, you're right, in a sense he's making it unfalsifiable, but it's not quite unfalsifiable in the following sense. With gravity, right, there's predictions about this. And if it were the case that general relativity was false, there are predictions that are made and it could be falsified. So the question to ask him is, if you're going to appeal to this, then it needs to be falsifiable as well as confirmable. And what's good about, for example, general relativity is that it's falsifiable. If there are predictions made and we observe something that goes against those predictions, then we can say that hypothesis has been falsified. So you now, Imran, if you're going to propose this, you need to propose something by which we can falsify the gremlins. And if you can't, it's unfalsifiable. And that in principle would be put to one side. We can't say it's impossible that it's gremlins, but it's going to be the least plausible option because it's unfalsifiable. And we're going to look at the falsifiable theories first because they are the ones that are more likely either to be proved correct or incorrect. Otherwise, we could do that for every claim. We could do the same thing with everything and just present unfalsifiable theories for everything. And we wouldn't progress anywhere. And that's why both falsification and confirmation is so important in combination, and like Tom was saying, making novel, predictable things. Because the gremlins, if you're going to make it and you say, oh, the gremlins, we expect this from the gremlins, and it doesn't happen, that would falsify it. And if you're going to say, well, anything we see is what the gremlins would do, well, then you're wasting your time.
Yeah. And I have never heard, I'm just realizing this, I've never heard Imran say anything that is substantial, really. He's always diverting. He's always talking a lot, saying nothing, and coming up with things which are utterly stupid. Really, I don't know why. I've never heard anything real from him. I've just realized that.
B, if you can falsify that and see if that's an acceptable theory to propose for a paper, and if not, why not?
For a theory to be acceptable, it needs to make testable predictions. So if your theory makes testable predictions,
all the predictions you can make with gravity, all the predictions you can make with gravity.
I mean. Okay, here
let him finish, because I think Tom is going to explain it quite well there now anyway.
Yeah, but the thing is, it would have been so easy because Sabur was talking about the scientific method. That is exactly why we have the scientific method. Just apply it and you can see immediately where it goes wrong.
It has to be a novel prediction. It has to be a new prediction that we don't know yet. If you're just making the same prediction, that's called post hoc theorization. That's not evidence for anything. So you can't post hoc theorize anything in science. You need to make novel predictions. Predict something new we don't know yet. Like Einstein predicted a new curvature of light around the sun. You have to predict something new.
So no, hang a sec. So you're taking, there's a conflation here. So what's happening is something already known about how gravity is sort of operating, and proposing a different theory for how that is operating is not. It's not post hoc ad hoc analysis. Now, what you're saying is that
yes, it is.
If you're taking, the only way you can make a new theory is to look at something that hasn't been already described before, and that doesn't make sense. What you can do is you can take something that's known as an observation, and you can bring a theory explaining how this would be working. So now I've proposed one to you. Now,
sorry to interrupt. That is literally the definition of post hoc theorization. That cannot be used to justify a new theory. You can use that to make a hypothesis, but in order to make the hypothesis reasonable, you need to then make novel testable predictions based off that hypothesis and then confirm them.
So I just want to understand.
Let's just go through this because this is silly. This is really silly. He doesn't understand this. So Robert's brought a page.
Not me.
No, who did this?
Sabur's doing this in the background.
Is Sabur doing this?
Yeah, so they're doing it. They're working in cahoots here. So it's Tom against the three of them, which is fine. That's still not going to help them. But
That's
yeah,
cool.
that's what's going
so
on.
So what is Sabur doing? Supernatural. He's highlighted supernatural. Superna. That's what he's looking for. And methodological naturalism, however, is a metaphysically more modest claim. This is just what we said.
Yeah, he read it before. He's just highlighting again as if somehow repeating the same thing is going to make the argument any stronger.
But this is, yeah. So
you're just repeating yourself. Congratulations. Do you think that that's somehow more persuasive if you just repeat yourself?
He's got a low battery.
Understand you. So if you do an experiment, let me just take something even more simple. All metals expand when heated. Let's take that as a hypothesis, yeah. And if I give,
that's not an hype. Fuck, this guy really doesn't know what he's doing. What you have made is an observation. All right, that's the beginning. And now what you need to do is you need to formulate a hypothesis which explains this. My God, how can they be so...
Give an alternative.
I mean, please, I'm sorry, but these guys have no idea what's going on, and they're making a stream about it. This is what they're talking about, and they don't know what they're talking about.
Explanation for that. Until that alternative explanation makes an additional prediction, it's not acceptable. Is that what you're saying?
Right. You can't post hoc theorize. That's why none of the theories in quantum mechanics are accepted yet, because all they're doing is...
I don't want you to change the topic to another thing. I want you to specifically
change the topic to another thing.
Yeah, I'm specifically giving you an example in science.
This is disingenuous, right? Tom brought up that light curves around the sun. Nobody knew this before. And Einstein's general relativity predicted there would be a curvature of light around large celestial bodies. Nobody had ever thought of this or come up with this. This was a novel prediction, and it would have either falsified or confirmed, as it did,
verified. Exactly.
Verified general relativity. So Tom is saying, do the same thing with your gremlins. If you can't do that, and you're just going to claim that they can appeal to anything, then you're not making your hypothesis is worthless. There's no way to falsify it. There's no way to falsify it. It's not something that we're going to take particularly seriously, because anybody could do the same thing, and we get nowhere. So you're shooting yourself in the foot using this. And so when he brought that up, you then brought up metal ions, and when he goes on to tell you that, to give you the example in in quantum mechanics, you then say don't change the subject when you change the subject yourself. I mean, just please be consistent. Either remember what was said before, or accept that he's able to bring up a different one to better explain his point, because your one was a poor example.
Science that demonstrates this is the case. So everything in quantum mechanics, we do not have a solution for what the correct interpretation of quantum mechanics is. It's because every one of the theories is just looking at the past evidence and explaining it, but none have made new novel predictions. So the reason they are not accepted is because none have made the new predictions. Every one of them can explain the past data, but none of them provide new data, so none of them are accepted. You need the new data for it to be accepted.
So if you make a theory, and it explains everything that's happened, but not following the generally understood mechanisms that are taken, it's not valid at all until you predict something new. Is that what you're saying?
Right. That's called post hoc rationalization.
Okay, so this doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever. And I'll tell you why it doesn't make any sense to me. Yes. Because if you take something like gravity, and you can take the same observations and you can have another explanation for it, which can also be correct. So, for example, with Newton, the idea that gravity was a pulling force. And with Einstein, the idea that gravity was a pushing force, i.e. it pushed, it warped the matter around it.
Yeah, they both had the same thing, so that's wrong.
Yeah.
So the observations in terms of what was being used essentially is the same.
Yep.
Was it accepted until was it accepted, or was it only accepted after other evidence came to verify it? So when Einstein gave his theory, obviously the new observations weren't present. Is that right?
Correct, which is why it was
Yeah.
not accepted until after the observations were confirmed.
So when Einstein gave his theory of relativity, it was not accepted. Is that what you're saying to me?
Correct, it was rejected, and it was hard for him to get it published. 6 months after it was published, he still got no recognition. It was only after his experiment with the sun was verified by other scientists that he got recognition. So yes, it wasn't until
I
after
didn't even know that.
his hypothesis was
Yeah, it's in-
verified that he got
it's
So
in-
now,
recognition.
Stop there for a
okay.
sec.
So now what? So he.
It's in which I can give you, by the way. It's in Lawrence Krauss's A Universe from Nothing. He talks about it because he goes through the history of
Okay.
cosmology, and Einstein made this prediction, and then Edmonton, I think it was Arthur Edmonton, made the observation of the perihelion of Mercury, it's changing slightly around the sun, and that's
Was
before
that
that
during the
nobody knew about
eclipse?
that, and that's what made Einstein famous. Everybody thought it was E equals MC squared, but it wasn't. Einstein became a household name after his prediction had been verified. I'm sure it's by Arthur Eddington, and that's in. I'm sure it's elsewhere, but it's mentioned in Lawrence Krauss's A Universe from Nothing.
Is that the experiment they did during the eclipse?
I think so. I think it is. Yes, because otherwise it'd be
I've
very
heard
hard to
about
see
it, but I never read of it. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
He had published this already. Is that right?
Correct,
Okay. But you're saying it wasn't accepted despite it being published.
correct.
Okay, so now I'm going to take you back to your point with Pigliucci, with Sheldrake. So the fact that he's published something doesn't mean that it's accepted, right?
Correct.
Correct. The consensus is that
So
parapsychology isn't
so the
accepted.
point that now understanding your point now. So the point that you initially were making with Sheldrake was, well, he's published it, therefore it's accepted. Is actually
No.
not correct.
No,
No,
I'm
stop
saying
there.
that methodological
That's not.
Wait. Let Tom explain it. Otherwise, we're talking the same thing as him. Let him finish his
naturalism
point.
does not reject the supernatural. So they didn't toss out the paper. Like you specifically said that if you put in like a soul hypothesis in the paper, that would be tossed out. That's just false. Like academic journals are happy to accept supernatural explanations in papers and publish those papers all the time. There's no exclusion of the supernatural in methodological naturalism, except in the fact that you need to justify.
Again, look,
Okay, stop there.
you keep
Yeah, so I think that's clear, right? The thing that Imran is seemingly not able to grasp is that you can publish something and the conclusion won't be accepted, but if the methodology fits within methodological naturalism, then you can publish it. So it's doubtful that somebody's going to come along and say, for example, with Sheldrake or somebody else, maybe they will, but I think some people won't, in the sense of like that methodology could be used to either confirm or falsify your hypothesis. And that's what methodological naturalism is about, whether you're appealing to a natural cause or you're looking for some other explanation that might be supernatural. That's the point that's being made. That specific part may not or probably hasn't been rejected, but the conclusion very likely has been. It's not
Okay, but
difficult,
this
right?
is just a thing that you now, which means go and do it. This is all. It doesn't mean that if you publish it, it's cut and dried. No, this is telling other people go and do it, verify it, see what you can make of it. Either it works out or not. This is just an idea I had, which seems to correspond with all the observations that I have made. It's called a hypothesis, and this is where you go and you say, all right, let's go and test it.
What
Is
I've
it
noticed-
an idea or not?
Yeah, and what I've noticed is sometimes you've got to speak, and it's not. Well, I'm not purposely trying to be disparaging, but in my mind, when I hear like Imran say this or whatever the case is, then I go, okay, how could I explain this such that a child would understand it, right? And then you go
Explain
through
it
the
to a
process.
5-year-old.
Yeah, well, maybe a high school student or whatever the case. But then you go through it in such a way that you can differentiate and show the two clear ones and say, hey, do you now understand the difference? Because you're conflating the conclusion with the methodology and suggesting that because the conclusion is not accepted, or most people laugh that out, that therefore the methodology itself is also invalid, and that's not the case. Do you understand that now, Imran? Right? Put it in that sense, so that it's almost impossible for somebody with even average intelligence to say, no, I don't understand. And if he still doesn't understand it, then okay, then it's a lost battle.
And I'm just realizing, thinking clearly in the chat says, yes, it's the Eddington experiment.
Yeah, Arthur Eddington, right? Eddington, not Edmonton. Okay, Eddington, thank you.
And of course, our local library, Dave immediately came up with a link to the Eddington experiment. And the link is in the chat. If anybody wants to know what this is, go ahead and read about it. Yes, as you guys are great.
keep saying that. Look, I've got this quotation of Pigliucci. You said I didn't understand it.
Correct.
No, you didn't.
Methodological naturalism is a metaphysically more modest claim. It takes the position that while there may be a supernatural realm or being. Now listen to this part.
I heard you the first time. I'm still.
Doesn't he realize that he is shooting himself? Doesn't he realize he's
No,
making
he
a
doesn't,
fool of
Stops.
himself?
No, he
But
doesn't,
it
because he
says it
doesn't
there in
understand
black
it.
and white.
No, but he
He's
doesn't
reading
understand it,
it out.
Stops. I think you, in my mind, you're banging your head here as if you want him to understand. He doesn't understand it, so stopping it and getting
No,
frustrated
I'm
that he doesn't.
showing other people. I'm showing other people that he said this now 4 times, and now he's reading it on screen, and he still has no clue what he is reading and why it is wrong.
You still don't understand it.
You really didn't understand it.
No,
It does not enter and need. It does not look, Imran. Tell me if I'm reading this wrong. It does not enter and need to be invoked in any discussions of scientific findings.
I mean, it's straightforward. How do you understand that? Tom, how do you understand that?
I've already explained this before. So again, it's because none of them have been verified. Like if you see a hoof print in the snow.
No, not that part.
Let me
Tom,
clarify here. Let me because I've.
No, Tom, listen to what I'm saying to you, because you're not answering my question. I'll ask you again. What does it mean where it says it does not enter and need not be invoked in any discussion of scientific findings? What does that mean?
That's literally what I'm answering. So if you see a hoof print in the snow, you do not invoke a unicorn. You invoke a horse, because horses you already have evidence for.
Yeah.
So methodological naturalism is saying we can only invoke the horses, not the unicorn, to explain the hoof print. Now, if you have some additional evidence that can show that the unicorn exists, then that would be reasonable to invoke. But until you do that, you can't invoke unicorns.
Your definition of methodological naturalism contradicts the Pigliucci one I just put up.
No, it doesn't.
No, I've literally spoken to him about this. It does not.
Oh, wow.
No,
you
it
spoke
does,
to him. Oh, that's
because
cool.
what we have in front of us right now is this. It does not enter and need to be invoked in any discussions of scientific findings. Now, you did this. What you're doing now is you're adding something else supplementary, which is the reason why naturalistic explanations are favored is because they're verified when supernatural ones are not. That claim that you're making is a separate claim, and it does not go against what's being said here. It really doesn't. Yeah,
it does.
It doesn't go against it because it's the same thing. So why it does not enter and it does not need to be invoked is because it's not verified.
Look, God's existence is something which science can't verify. Yes or no?
What is he doing? Where is this going? What does this have to do? Why doesn't Hamza upstairs there say, listen, this is not what we are talking about. We're talking about new atheists. We're not talking about God's existence. Why doesn't he jump in here and clamp down on Subur and say, Subur, you're going off track?
Because it's his buddy and he doesn't know what's going on, Stops. And they all stick together anyway.
False. We can verify it if you make the right claims.
Okay. So you're saying God, the transcendent creator, is a scientific hypothesis?
Yeah, lots of gods are testable.
Again, you're not really getting my point here. What you're basically doing is this.
Just stop it there.
You're saying
this is another tactic we've got to be aware of, right? We're just exposing the tactics here, because he doesn't have much else. So he thinks that if he says you're misunderstanding me, and he repeats the same thing again, then the gullible audience will go, oh, the guy must be misunderstanding because he has to repeat himself. No, what's in fact happening is he doesn't have any adequate rebuttal. So he goes back to his motte position, right? He's tried the Bailey position, that's been overrun, and he doesn't have any defense against that. So he's retreating to the motte position and saying, his motte position is, I'll just repeat myself and I'll tag on the word, you don't understand me. And somehow that makes it like a substantial rebuttal when in fact it's just a repeat of what he said before. There's nothing substantial that's being said here, right? But the gullible audience will hear, because they got selective hearing and not much critical thinking, that Subbur's had to repeat himself, therefore the other guy must be wrong or must be misunderstanding him, right? Just another tactic.
What I did when Imran did this to me, because I answered a question, he says, no, you don't understand me. I said, hang on, let me just, in my words, repeat the question, and then you tell me whether I understood the question, because you didn't understand my answer. And then I repeated the question to him, and I said, is that your question? He said, yes. I said, okay, and I answered it, but you don't understand my answer. This is the problem. So like this, you're circumventing it, that it goes this way. Here we have the link to the paper. Brilliant.
Saying,
I can prove it.
Look, this is just a joke. To be very fair. with
Yes,
So do you
you're
want me to
right.
prove
You
it?
don't get you.
God.
What you gonna, sorry, I'm interested. What are you going to prove?
One sec, Hamza.
God is testable. I can prove that a transcendent God is testable.
Hamza, let's deal with one thing at a time. Yeah.
Go on.
God, by definition, the belief in God that we have is a being that is unseen. So we believe we can arrive at God's existence using reason, using fitrah, and natural inclination,
No, you
but
can't.
not observation. Science deals with observation. So how can you use something which its main operation is using observation to observe the unobservable?
Easy.
It doesn't make any sense, Tom.
Yes, it does.
And this definition of methodological naturalism, which we have here, this definition, it rules out this idea that you can just willy-nilly
No,
in
it
science add in hypotheses which are supernatural. You simply cannot do that.
No. So you can use indirect observation, which
Exactly.
is something commonly used in science. So
The
what you do is you
consequences.
say, if a transcendent God exists, and I can pray to this God to give me a golden brick, and a golden brick appears in front of me every time I pray,
There you go.
that would be verification of
Just
your
stop
God.
it there for a
You
moment,
don't
because I know what's coming now. Now, if you're listening to this on the video, either live or afterwards, you're not going to believe what happens very shortly, right? I think we can all, everybody who's even thinking remotely is using a part of their brain here, and none of us are probably using all of it at any one time, but some of us are using it, us are using more than others. But he's using an analogy here to show that if this, here's an analogy to show that in principle it does work. Now, I want you to listen carefully to one of the responses, whether it's immediately now or shortly hereafter, about the golden brick. This is why I say, again, with these guys, you got to know who your interlocutors are, and you only find out afterwards when they make absolutely ridiculous statements. So you go, like, was the guy not paying attention? Was he off with the fairies or something? They're now going to hone in on the golden brick and say, well, my God doesn't create golden bricks. Not completely misunderstanding the entire analogy. So if you are going to bring an analogy, use one of their own ones, like God splitting the moon or something, because that their little brains can get around. But God creating a golden brick, that's just like, that's impossible in their worldview, because the Quran doesn't say so. If the Quran doesn't say it, then it's not something that'll happen. So that's just a slight tweak on this, but this is what will happen now. Just listen to this and hold your head in despair. Try not to bang it against the wall.
to directly observe the God.
Wait. Tom, that would not be verification of the concept of God that I just said. That would be verification of a cartoon, right? A God that no one believes in. That's what that would be a verification of. You made
Sabor, it doesn't matter what the God does.
No, you know what you've done, Tom, right? We're talking about our concept of God, transcendent God. You've come up with a straw man, which is a God that when you click your fingers, you get a Ferrari. Oh, I didn't get a Ferrari. Therefore, this concept of God doesn't exist.
The gold brick doesn't matter. The gold brick is just an example.
It does matter, because what you've done is we're talking about the existence of a transcendent creator. You've made a straw man, and you've used that to try and disprove our point. And it doesn't make any sense.
Sabor, it doesn't matter.
There.
No, come on.
Okay, so now I think hopefully you're in agreement. I think most of us are getting to the point now where literally this guy's understanding is at a low level. And because he throws out a few words and he parrots back some things that he's read, I mean, any parrot can remember a few things, some Muslims take him seriously. The fact that he suggests that was a straw man just tells you how little he's following the conversation. Again, hopefully you haven't hurt your heads, banging your heads. Just hold your head in disbelief that somebody that Muslims claim is some sort of academic scholar or somebody that's got something interesting or substantial to say says these type of things.
My God.
It's just a random example I thought of in my head. The point is that you can make testable predictions based off of a transcendent being.
But you're not using a random example here. You're using a random example to make a general point. That's what you're doing. And that random example, if it's a straw man, we're going to point you out as a straw man.
No. The example was, can you make a testable prediction of a transcendent being? So I just imagined a transcendent being, which is my God, not
Yeah,
yours.
but Tom, the point here is that your imagination of the transcendent being.
No. This is my transcendent being. This is only mine, not yours. So I'm
So
saying.
let me ask you a question, Tom. A magician comes up to you, right?
Sure.
And he says, I'm going to pray to my God that a rabbit comes out of this hat, yeah? And then a rabbit comes out of the hat. Do you now believe God exists?
If it's novel, testable, falsifiable, verifiable, yes.
Brilliant. That is how you answer this question. Now, I'm should I hold my breath? I want to see now the reaction.
Right. So what's your first result? What's your first thought?
he starts stammering. He doesn't know what to say anymore.
When you see the rabbit come out of the hat.
Well, since we already see rabbits, there's nothing novel about it. It has to be a novel
Exactly.
prediction.
No, but it's come out of a hat from nowhere.
Right. So if it was a novel prediction, that would be good evidence.
So a magician pulls a rabbit out of a hat. You now believe that this God exists.
No, because we've already seen rabbits in a hat. That's not novel. It has to be novel.
You've already seen gold bricks. What's that got to do with anything?
I've never seen a gold brick materialize in front of me. That would be really cool.
You haven't seen a rabbit come out of a hat?
Goodness, stop it there.
Yes,
Yeah.
I've seen it.
This is what happens. This is kind of what happens when you step in an adult conversation and you're utterly unprepared. You haven't even been following it. The fact that he thinks that the gold brick by a god is the same as a rabbit out of a hat just tells you how little he's following this conversation. But you said this to me a long time ago, Stops, and I wasn't sure of it at the time, and obviously now I'm convinced because you've spoken to thousands of Muslims. They just can't conceptualize certain things, certain concepts, and putting them together in like a puzzle seems to be an extremely hard thing for some of these guys to do, right? Because they're looking at it, certain things so literally. If it doesn't say it or it doesn't match my book or my very narrow outlook, it's very difficult for them to like conceptualize or to entertain hypotheticals or know the difference between one hypothetical or one hypothesis and another. So there's just all this confusion going on because they're so limited in their thinking and they seem to be unable to expand the brain power to, not that they don't have it, I'm not suggesting they haven't got it, but if it is there in reserve, it's like it's not being used. If you got a Ferrari and you only do 30 miles an hour and you never open up the engine to do 200, it doesn't mean that it can't do it, but it's the fact that you're sticking to 30 miles an hour, and then you sell the car because you say it doesn't work, or somebody looks at it and goes, this car can't do anything. And it's likely because the car's never been opened up. And I think it's the same here. The brain has never been opened up to go out on the freeway and just accelerate, right? It's always been constrained by some sort of, quote, speed limit, metaphorically.
Slop and badly. Dave has come up with the correct link for the Mott and Bailey doctrine.
Brilliant.
Lots of rabbits come out of
Right, and
it
why is that not God?
because it's not novel. It's not a novel testable prediction. For it
What's
to
the
be
first time
evidence,
the rabbit came out of the hat?
which is something common. So if you say, like, I saw the sunrise tomorrow, that wouldn't be evidence of God either. We've all seen the sunrise.
No, but you
You
have
need
to pull
something.
something from nowhere. For me, you get rinsed by Dynamo and David Blaine and all that. They'll show you miracles, mate.
Hamza, can you share my screen, please?
Yeah, 1 second.
He doesn't understand the
No,
novel.
all those things they've done are things we've already seen. So none of that is novel. You need is a novel testable prediction. So if you can,
So Subu has now spent half an hour on Wikipedia looking up billions and billions of demons. Willingness.
I can't see what it's on screen at the moment.
Okay, I'm reading it. It is not that the methods and institutions of science somehow compel us to accept a material explanation of the phenomenal world, but on the contrary, that we are forced by an a priori adherence to material causes to create an apparatus of investigation and a set of concepts that produce material explanations, no matter how counterintuitive, no matter how mystifying to the uninitiated. And okay, this is a 30-year-old book which says something. Okay, brilliant.
Yeah, and so what? I mean, Tom and I and other people disagree. So you're bringing it out as if it's evidence in your favor. Cool, somebody said that. I'm suggesting we can bring up things that say the opposite. So what now? What is going to be decisive here? Or are you going to accept that some people think that it is and some people think that it isn't? I'm of the view, and others aren't, Tom is, you are, and many others I've spoken to, are of the view that it doesn't rule it out in principle. Even if it's a priori, you start with the naturalistic explanations, that doesn't mean that you rule it out. Now, if this paper, book, or whatever the case says it does, I simply disagree with it. And Tom has given an example, I've given an example. What's your evidence that it cannot be the case? Because somebody said so. That's not good enough. What's the argument in favor? Because that somebody is making a claim like you. So all you're doing is appealing to authority and saying, well, this guy said it. Well, why does that guy say it, and why do you accept that?
Well, but Rob, this is a book that criticizes a sentence by Professor Dawkins where he says,
No, I can't see that.
Things appear to have been carefully and artfully designed, page 140. And this is exactly the case. Things, living organisms, appear to have been designed, but they only appear. And this is why he's bringing up this. This is another example where somebody is saying something about something that he wants to be criticized, and therefore he's now accepting anything and everything this person says. Same thing.
This is something interesting which I thought I'd bring up, which is what Richard Lewontin says about this, right? It's not the methods and institutions of science somehow compel us to accept a material explanation for the phenomenal world.
I just made a mistake. I'm sorry. It is not by Dawkins, it's by Sagan.
But on the contrary, that we are forced by our a priori adherence to material causes to create an apparatus of investigation and a set of concepts that produce material explanations, no matter how counterintuitive, no matter how mystifying to the uninitiated. Moreover, that materialism is absolute, for we cannot allow a divine foot in the door. If that's not explicitly clear, I don't know what is. And now
That's philosophical naturalism, so that's not what we're talking about. I don't know
no,
what
he's
you're
talking about in science. It's not the methods and institutions of science somehow compel us to accept a material explanation of the phenomenal world.
That is exactly, I don't know. It says here, it is not that the methods compel us to do that. Because
the philosophical
methods
idea
allow
does.
us to do that. But if we go to the philosophical aspect, then it is absolute and we cannot allow a divine foot in the door. That is exactly what he's saying.
Yeah,
He's
there's
showing
two
you the
things
two
here.
different types.
Correct. It's saying it explicitly, and he thinks it's one thing. The interesting thing is that he says that Pigliucci says you shouldn't conflate, or that methodological naturalism doesn't compel you to philosophical naturalism. The quote that he's doing is actually separating the two, and he's now conflating the two and thinking that if that's not clear, what is? Because he's taking the philosophical view and not realizing, and Tom is pointing it out, that what we're actually talking about is the methodological. So the confusion is ironically on his side of the coin here, when he's claimed that it's everybody else doing it.
He's talking in the context
Materialism is absolute. That's literally the definition of philosophical naturalism.
Yes,
Boom.
and he here is talking about explanations being used within science. So within science, they cannot allow a divine foot in the door.
That's
Right,
philosophical
because he's a
naturalism.
naturalist,
That's not
so
science.
I don't know why you brought that up.
Wait. Tom, do you
really
now
is confused,
finally
isn't he?
realize?
Yeah, he doesn't know what is going on.
But what? Listen to what he's going to do now, right? This is his other technique, and I'm sure Dave and maybe he stops, you'll know it. Whatever your shortcoming is that you don't even realize you have, tell the other guy that he has that shortcoming, and in fact, either because you don't know that you're the one that's got it, or because you do realize you've got it and you're just trying to shift the burden over to him so that people don't pick up that you've got it. But either way, he should be looking in the mirror, because he's accusing Tom of exactly what he has. The irony here is not lost to any of us who are paying some attention.
Finally realize.
No, remember, Sabor, there's a difference between...
You realize you've shot yourself in the foot right now.
No, you have.
You don't realize you shot yourself in the foot right now.
Sabor, remember,
You said divine, you said supernatural explanation.
Is he getting muted there?
Yes.
Is he getting muted?
I don't know.
Is Tom getting muted?
Methodological naturalism doesn't discount them.
You're
You can
muted, Tom.
happen. Here we have a direct scientist saying the opposite, and you're like, oh no, that's not what he means. Like, we could do that all day. We could just keep. I can.
No.
That this is what a scientist says. You could say, well, that's not what he really meant. What he really meant was this.
No, Sabor, there's a difference between methodological naturalism and philosophical naturalism. As you've pointed out, he is a philosophical naturalist. He is not talking about methodological naturalism. He is a philosophical naturalist. Those are two different things.
Do I have to read it out to you again? He's talking about within the institutions of science, you cannot have non-material explanations.
Sabor, the quote literally said, materialism is absolute. That is literally the definition of philosophical naturalism. That is not methodological naturalism. Like, what are you talking about?
Look, okay, do you know what? I'm going to read it out again because you simply don't understand.
Stop.
And
Materialism is absolute. Literally.
Did I not tell you? He's going to read it out again because Tom doesn't understand it. The irony, hopefully everybody who's listening, and I'm sure you guys are, probably most of you are much smarter than I am anyway, but you should be seeing it, right? The fact that he's reading it out again is actually, he doesn't realize that he doesn't understand it. This is how short-sighted, I guess, he is, or cognitive dissonance that is going on here, not realizing that he's the one that's misunderstanding it. He's going to read it out again as if this is because Tom is misunderstanding it, right? I'm definitely now pretty much convinced that he doesn't really understand much. And when other people have said this, I was like, in my mind, I was in the back of my mind going, no, I think he's a bit dishonest. And maybe I was I was, I had some bias against him with our previous, because he was being dishonest with me in the park that one time. So my bias lay there that actually maybe he does know a little bit about what he's talking about, but he's on purpose doing it. Now I'm far more convinced that he really doesn't understand these sentences.
And look what he's looking for. Richard Dawkins' divine foot. It should be Charles.
I mean, he should be
Carl Sagan.
worshipping Richard Dawkins the more he talks about it in this way. He should change over. He's got the wrong prophet. At least Dawkins got some things right. His prophet got almost nothing right. So if we were to take a quote prophet in inverted commas, then he's backing the wrong horse.
But I'm looking at the results, and I'd love to see the bottom one. Dawkins' vulgarization of Darwinism and Lewontin's non-something. That should be interesting, because this seems to refer to this guy.
Similar last time when you refused to admit that Dawkins was wrong about something. Yeah,
He wasn't.
You're just doing the same thing again.
Yeah,
was
he's
right
being
again.
accurate, and you're not.
You were not right. You were very
So
much
while you're looking,
like
while you're looking for that, Sabu, I just want to, unless you find it very quickly. So
Does he know he's looking for the wrong thing?
interestingly, when you gave your gold brick experiment, one of the things you said was, "This is my conception of God."
He can't find it because he's looking for Richard Dawkins instead of Carl Sagan.
But listen now, before you carry on going there, listen what's happening now, right? They've gone backwards and forwards on the philosophical naturalism because Sabur doesn't understand that the quote that he's made there. And he thinks that because this guy said philosophical naturalism and the word science in the same paragraph, that they somehow, that rules it out. But as Thomas pointed out, that's philosophical naturalism. And if somebody claims that they're a philosophical naturalist and that's what they mean by science, then I think that's a fringe position. I could be wrong, but I certainly don't accept that. Most people think that science is methodological naturalism. But I think, and Dave brought up something there as well. And now the point that I was going to make just jumped out of my head because I was going to say something else. Oh, Imran comes in now. Now he's going back on a completely different point, right? This is unfortunately what Imran does. When there's a break there, we're going to call him tangent Imran. He's going to bring up a tangential point and go off on a sidetrack now where this thing gets lost. I suppose Sabur's looking for it, so he's going to come back to it because he's like a dog with a bone, but he doesn't realize that the bone is choking him and not the other guy. So he'll come back to it, but Imran's going off on a tangent now. So let's listen to this tangential question.
And I think this is the problem that happens, actually. You tend to make these sort of straw men gods, and then you propose that as a god that will give you a gold bar as soon as you sort of request one, as something that actually would be something that any theist would accept as any model for a god.
Well, no, I would never do that.
Now, there's no one here who accepts that that a god would exist who would give you a gold bar just when you requested one.
Right,
so
I never said that.
the experiment itself is flawed because it's not looking for the right thing. Does that make any sense to you?
No, none at all. Because again, the question was, can we make a testable prediction for a transcendent being? I gave an example of here is a transcendent being, like if it would give us gold bricks. That is one we can test for. So yeah, it is possible.
Tom, but so here, this is what I'm saying to you. So you've missed the point. So what you're doing is you're imagining a transcendent being who would give you a gold bar, and say if there was a transcendent being who, whenever I asked for a gold bar, would give me a gold bar. If that being existed, then the way I would test that is by asking for a gold bar, and every time I got a gold bar, that transcendent being would exist. Yeah. No one believes amongst us that there is a transcendent being who, whenever you ask for a gold bar, would give you a gold bar.
I never said you did.
How is that evidence for finding the existence of God?
It's a principle, Imran, my dear fellow. It's a principle. He's just bringing up a hypothetical to demonstrate a principle. Even a high school student understands this, my friend.
Now, I just read something here that Subu has brought up. And, okay, on top it says, our willingness to accept blah, 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 what he's just read. And then it says, materialism is absolute. Okay, so this is exactly what we're talking about. The
philosophical naturalism, right?
Two types of naturalism. For we cannot allow a divine foot in the door. Why does he stop there? What he should be reading is the eminent Kant scholar Louis Beck used to say that anyone who could believe in God could believe in anything. To appeal to an omnipotent deity is to allow that at any moment the regularities of nature may be ruptured, that miracles may happen. is exactly what we're saying. He doesn't, this is how he reads, okay? He sees this one, we cannot allow a divine foot in the door. So this quote mine, this sound bite is what he's going for. That's the point he wants to drive home. He doesn't read a little bit further that this is exactly what we are saying. If you want to believe in a God, you can believe in anything. And that is exactly the point that T-Jump is making. And you are putting it on the screen for everybody to see. But because it has the sentence, we cannot allow a divine foot in the door, you are blind to the rest. I can't believe that.
Yeah, but that's what he does,
your
right?
question-
He quote mines one or two sentences and doesn't give you the context or where it is or read the rest of it or ignores the rest of it and then wants to make the claim, hoping that other people either haven't seen it or whatever the case is. And when you do get a chance to read it, then you go, okay, hang on a moment. There's more to be said here. This was in a context or whatever, because they're always very hard on the context, right? When you quote something out of the Quran, hey, there's a context. We've got to talk about this in context. But when it's the other way around, they ignore context or cherry pick a thing. So we just got to know the interlocutors we're dealing with, right?
And then if you carry on reading, this is exactly the point that T-Jump is making, that you get different kinds of gods with different personalities, different attributes, different anything. And this is exactly what it says there, that in the Chinese epic, blah, 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 you have different demons with different forms of life. Oh, God. I don't know. These three guys are really, I don't know, they're incredibly weak.
Is it possible? Is it logically possible, like in any possible world, doesn't matter if we believe it or not, is it logically possible to do a test that could verify a transcendent being? And I'm like, yes, it is. If there was a transcendent being like this, doesn't matter if anybody believes in it, then we could test for this kind of transcendent being.
Yeah, so this is exactly the point that I was making. So you've made up a...
No, Imran, that is not the point you were making. Again, you did not answer, you did not understand the answer. He understood the question, but you don't get the answer. It's always the same problem with you.
I think one thing, though, that stop just for a second. I think one thing we can do, though, as interlocutors is recognize when the interlocutor that we're speaking to is not tracking. And then we've got to adjust to the best of our ability to try and help them. Imran is just simply not tracking this, right? And so in this case, if I was sitting there with Tom, I'd immediately bring up an example that they accept, like the splitting of the moon or Muhammad flying on a winged horse or whatever the case may be, because that they can't deny, right? Because in my mind, I'm going, they're not tracking this, right? And it's a lack of, wider thinking. So let's go in with an example they use, because otherwise they're going to think this is a straw man, not realizing it's just a hypothetical to demonstrate a principle. We'll demonstrate a principle with either a hypothetical or a claim that they already accept, because then this criticism just falls away. It's a non-existent criticism anyway, but let's just bat it out the park by using one of their own examples. So you've got to fine tune your approach when you come across a high level interlocutor they'd immediately understand the principle. They would never ever go on to, well, that's not my God. So what it also does is show you the level of interlocutors that you're dealing with. Because like I say, somebody that understands the principle is not going to challenge the hypothetical unless it was a contradictory hypothetical. They're going to understand what the principle is that you're trying to get at with the hypothetical, and they're going to move on. But because these guys don't, that tells you that they're at a much lower level. So you've now got to adjust yourself to try and speak to them to the best of your ability, if that's possible.
And just ask, would you accept X, or what would be something that would convince you as an example of a concept, and then go from there. Yeah, I think that's good advice. Yeah.
Being that no one accepts,
right?
Yeah. So Imran, yes, like your point is quite clear. Like it's just a straw man, right? But anyway, about this, like this particular quotation, which all Tom could read is materialism is absolute. Like he was absolutely blind to everything else. From the very beginning, we can see this quotation is about science, our willingness to accept scientific claims that are against common sense. And this is about science and the supernatural. In this context, we're being told divine explanations are not allowed a foot in the door within science.
Why doesn't he read this? Why does he only go for his soundbite? Our willingness to accept claims which are scientific, that are against common sense, is the key to an understanding of the real struggle between science and the supernatural. There you have it. There you have everything in one sentence. It's so easy.
This is what Richard Lewontin's talking about. So it's very important that when methodological naturalism is being put forward, that we understand, you know what, we can accept it as a working assumption, but this doesn't lead to philosophical naturalism. Now, Tom is again and again and again, despite all of the evidences we're giving, he's still like, no. Within science, you can have divine explanations. You can have supernatural explanations.
No, fucking hell, this is making me mad. No, that is not the case. That is not the claim. You cannot have divine explanations. You can have tests for divinity. You can have tests that will try and use this to explain this. It's just that they have always failed. That is the point. It's not that... no, come on.
They perfectly fit, right? But this is the exact opposite of what Richard Lewontin's saying and other scientists are saying. So I don't see how, Tom, your position has any weight.
Because philosophical naturalism is also a scientific position. That's philosophical naturalism.
Exactly.
Like, if you are a philosophical naturalist, then you believe that you can't ever put divine explanations ever in anything because materialism is absolute. That's literally talking about philosophical naturalism. Like,
this is talking about methodological naturalism.
No,
where does it say that? Where does it say methodological anywhere in that?
Okay, look, it doesn't need to say methodological. What is it saying? It's talking about science, and it's talking about within science, there's a commitment to materialism. And that materialism is that they're forced by the a priori adherence. What does a priori mean? A priori means before observation. Before observation, Tom. So I want you to just at least understand, right? Before we get down to whether you're going to admit that Richard Dawkins is wrong about methodological naturalism and philosophical naturalism, at least understand that methodological naturalism rules out supernatural explanations.
No, that's philosophical naturalism. I'm literally just reading this off of the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy.
You simply don't understand.
He'll just steamroll it.
No, I
and
do.
just say
I'm
it's
literally reading this
simply-
off of the Stanford
Yeah, just stop
Encyclopedia
it
of
there, man.
Philosophy.
Stop.
Philosophical naturalism.
Right, he'll just say you don't understand it, right? So again, this is just a repeating of the position. There isn't an argument here in any way. He's quoted Lewington, which is a philosophical naturalist, and if Lewington's
right,
version
yeah.
of science is philosophical naturalism, then that's in contradiction, or at least it's separate from those people who believe that science is a methodological naturalist undertaking. So him trying to shoehorn this is the position. Even when he used the word methodological in here, just shows us, right? And Tom is reading it off the Stanford Encyclopedia there. But Subhu's position is you just don't understand it. So I'll just keep repeating myself because I don't have a rebuttal. And if I repeat myself enough times, maybe I will start believing myself. My gullible viewers and fellow panelists will believe me, and then we'll feel happy with ourselves. But none of the rest of us are taking this on board, right? We're just seeing this as noise. This is repeated noise. There's nothing substantial here. And this is again not demonstrated to us. And then at the end of this they'll sum it up and say, Tom just wouldn't accept this, right? This was so obvious because I kept repeating myself and claiming this one position. No, you need an argument, and an argument does not mean that you cherry pick one guy and make that the position. And when it's shown to you that he's got a different position to Tom's or somebody else's, or in fact what most people accept science to be, then you just say, well, you're wrong. That's not an argument. That's just an assertion.
And this is now the disadvantage of doing it my way instead of taking it live from YouTube, because I can't zoom out and show the comments, because I'm sure that the comments are reflecting exactly what you are saying now.
Yeah, I'm reading out something to you that's crystal clear.
Where does that say methodological naturalism? It doesn't
It isn't
anywhere.
talking about scientific claims.
So is philosophical naturalism. It's also talking about scientific claims. So that does not help your case at all.
Look, what it is divine explanations are not accepted by Richard Lewontin. Do you at least admit that?
Yes.
Yes, he's a philosophical naturalist.
And he's a methodological naturalist.
Where does it say that?
No, he can't be both, you idiots.
He's talking about scientific claims, and within the scientific claims, they don't accept divine claims.
That's
If you
not
just
true.
Google his name, you can find an explanation of his actual position. He is a philosophical naturalist. So he's
I know
obviously
he's a
also
philosophical
going to be...
I already know he's a philosophical naturalist. What I'm saying to you,
Okay, I mean, it's saying here that there is a struggle in accepting the supernatural. He does say that you can exclude it, but he says that there is a struggle here, and we take the side in spite of patent absurdity and blah, blah, blah. He explains it. I
Did you
don't
also notice,
understand why he
Stops?
doesn't read it.
But you also notice what happened there. He did the Mott and Bailey again, right? He said, do you accept that Lewinton says this, right? That's the Mott position. Because what his original position is that science is, he's quoting this guy as if the scientific position now is philosophical naturalism. It rules it out. It's absolute materialism and nothing else. Well, that's not the methodological position. So when Tom shows that that position is overrun, that's defeated, I'll retreat back to the Mott position again. Hey, do you agree that Richard Lewinton says so? Right, that's
It's
a
about
weak
science.
claim.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
a trivial point, and it's irrelevant. What Richard Lewinton or Lewin claims is irrelevant. He's entitled to his claim, but why should I accept that? That's the point. And if I accept methodological naturalism, then telling me that Richard Lewinton accepts philosophical naturalism is like telling me that he breathes air. It has the same substantial or non-substantial value. In other words, it doesn't have any substantial response to the other position.
And he explains it here. He says there's a struggle. This is why I think it's like this. And he explains why he does it. So
He's talking about the way that science actually works, and science doesn't accept supernatural explanations.
His
which is
understanding of
philosophical
science.
naturalism. So he's not talking about methodological naturalism. He's talking about philosophical naturalism, which also happens to talk about science.
Look, Tom, let's deal with one thing at a time. Is he talking about science in this passage?
Yes.
Yes, and he's talking about within the way that his understanding of science, you do
There
not
go.
accept
Stop,
supernatural
stop,
explanations.
Stop quickly.
Which is called
Stop it there. Did you hear the key phrase? I was mouthing it myself in my mind now as it was going. That's his understanding of science. I was saying that Subur just used those words himself. The fact that he just used those words himself has shot himself in the foot. This is Lewinton's position. Tom and myself and other people do not have to accept it. You just pointed out that even Lewinton himself says there's a struggle there. If what he means by a struggle is between philosophical and methodological naturalism, in terms of the scientific method, if he's claiming the scientific method should be philosophical naturalism, I'm going to say no. I think it should be methodological. So there'll be a difference of opinion between the two of us there. But that is his position. That's fine. That's the Mott position. I'm not arguing that isn't his position. I'm arguing that that's not my position, and I'm not prepared to accept that. And Tom is presumably saying the same thing, and so are many, many other people.
And this is the point. If somebody says, yeah, but cars are always loud. And I will say, well, no, if they have an electric engine, they're very quiet. Yeah, but all cars have an exhaust, and that is why they're loud. Not understanding that he's always talking about combustion engines in a car, and I am not. So there are two different types of engines, and he's always basing his argument that cars are loud on the presupposition that we're talking about combustion engines, and we're not. So that there's two different versions, and just sticking to one side all the time instead of taking the other position into consideration shows his own limitations. He's incapable of going a step higher and saying, "Oh, look, there's two different ones." He's incapable. He's only going for the one thing that he sees there. We cannot allow a divine foot in the door. That's all he sees. That's all he wants to see, and everything else is blinkered out.
philosophical naturalism, yes.
But he's doing that within the realm of science. And he believes that is a commitment to materialism science has.
Which is called philosophical naturalism, yes.
Well, not philosophical naturalism can exist even if the scientific method did not. Do you agree with that?
What?
Sure.
Yes. So here he's talking about within the field of science, you have to be committed to only material causes. Yes or no?
No, he's talking about from philosophical naturalism. Like this is literally his position. This is not, there's no ambiguity there. Find where he says methodological anywhere in
because he's talking about science here. That's why.
Science does not mean methodological. You talk about science and ontology.
You can't be so dumb to actually think it has to say methodological. He's talking about scientific claims, and within scientific claims, they do not accept non-supernatural. They don't accept supernatural claims. They don't.
You think talking about methodological naturalism, it has to say methodological.
When I previously used the quotation from Pigliucci, which did say methodological naturalism, you still didn't accept it. It's the same as last time when you refused to accept when Dawkins was actually wrong. I just think you're absolutely blinded by new atheism, and you cannot see the wood from the
The
trees,
irony.
and you can't admit that
Amazing,
there's
eh?
simply a incoherency in what you're saying.
Yeah, that's because it's patently false. I have dozens of quotes of methodological naturalists saying, yes, you can accept supernatural causes, as in all of the papers I listed that are actually supernatural published.
Rupert Sheldrake, that was the name you kept
He's-
pointed out.
It was
I
one
mean,
example.
the very fact,
He's not a methodological naturalist.
the very fact, yes, of course I know that. The very fact you had to use Rupert Sheldrake shows how desperate you are to prove a fringe opinion as being the main opinion.
No, I don't
He
have.
never
to
said it was the main opinion.
Rupert Sheldrake first.
Stop there. There's
No,
two
there are thousands of
disingenuous
papers, and that
things
doesn't
there.
help.
This is
Two
just
things
example.
there. Yeah, this is two things, right? Just notice what's going on here, right? The Rupert Sheldrake thing was brought up before. He's now trying to bring that back as if this is something extra. I don't know what we'd call this fallacy, raising the dead fallacy or something like that. After the point has already been put to bed in whatever way, let's raise it again to try and make Tom sound more stupid. But there was a second point there again while I was thinking about it. That went out of my head. There were two things that were going on. That was the first thing with
He didn't say that this is mainstream. The
oh
only
yeah,
one.
exactly. That was the second point. Yeah, at no point did he say Rupert Sheldrake is mainstream. All he said was that he'd put his findings into academic journals, and he had
For
used
example,
methodological naturalism. And yes, people are likely to be very critical of that, which I agree with. But I'm not sure that they're so critical of the methodology, as we've said, as opposed to the conclusions that Sheldrake wanted to draw or possibly was looking to draw.
Help your case at all. That's just an ad hominem. He has
No,
academic published
no,
papers
I think what it
in
is-
journals by
No, no,
methodological naturalists.
Why
So
did
they
you
do not.
use somebody? Why did you use somebody who absolutely is not accepted by new atheists?
It doesn't
Because he's a
matter.
very famous name that anybody can search and find papers for.
No, because he is somebody that is not accepted.
Who
meaning
cares?
his claims are seen as unscientific and pseudoscientific.
Yes, so is all parapsychology, but they can publish papers in academic journals that are methodological naturalist journals. The methodological naturalists do not reject the supernatural just out of hand a priori. They do not do that, which is we can prove that because they
So
accept
tell me this.
papers in
Tell me
journals.
this. What does methodological naturalism mean?
It means the application of just methodological sciences that are verifiable to the natural world.
To the natural world. Okay. And what type of explanations do they actually use?
What?
I mean, why is he going over this? This is not going to, he's not going to reveal a contradiction there or anything like this. This is again like a straw man position, right? Why are you doing this? It's like a red herring. Let me go over something that it's like raising the dead fallacy, raising the dead horse or something.
No, there's a no. This is his tactic. He does that. As soon as he's stumped, if he doesn't know something, he goes back into, I am the teacher, I am in charge, I'm going to ask you many questions until I find something that you cannot explain, that you cannot say, where you are hesitating, and then I quickly jump on that. This is his approach. This is what he does. He goes into questioning mode. You need to catch this. As soon as he starts doing that, you need to ask, you can answer one question, but immediately ask, does that comply with you, or can you tell me what your understanding is, or how do you explain
How's that relevant, in
naturalism or
other
something?
words? Yeah.
And yeah, you just need to question him back. You cannot, because he's pushing you against the ropes now. This is his tactic that he's doing. He's going into his question mode. He loves doing that. As soon as he's stumped, that's what he does.
Natural ones.
Thank God.
And then he does
Because
that.
there's
Yeah.
no evidence of the supernatural.
That's what I get to. That is literally the only thing I was trying to get you to
He's
admit.
got a cognitive, cognitive dissonance here. Thank God. Oh, thank you. As if he's made a substantial point. I mean, I hope after this series, anybody who watches us from start to finish, or even the last two parts, I think you really cannot take Sabua seriously anymore. Some of us used to think, well, he's an interlocutor that we can refute and stuff like that. But now, I think after this, refutation and rebuttal and exposure that we've done here, I don't think anybody's going to take him seriously. Well, nobody that's paying attention. I understand the Muslims will, but then, a lot of them are hypnotized and gullible anyway. So, we can only hope that they invoke critical thinking at some point. And I would try to do that. That's sort of one of my goals, is to help those Muslims who don't think critically to start doing so. And it's not so easy, because now they have to challenge, their deeply held, gullible beliefs that they never really thought about before. But the fact that he said thank you as if he's made it, the answer there, as if Tom has agreed with him now on some substantial point, which was what we saw in part 3, the previous part. Again, just a tactic. Nobody's fooled by this that is paying attention. And I think we've highlighted that enough that nobody here who's listening and paying attention will ever be fooled by this again.
And if anybody still wants like hard data, I've done, I think, 3 or 4 videos on this guy where I actually analyze sentence for sentence, word for word. Plus, I've done a fact check where I take a claim that he makes, one of his quotes, and I check, is this really the case? And this is just a quick 2 or 3 minute video. So it's very easy to verify anything that we are saying here. Oh shit, my mouse is finished.
They use natural explanations.
Correct.
That's what they do.
Because there is no evidence of the supernatural, and that's it.
Okay.
If there
But
was,
just
you
showing
use
your
it.
papers and they don't look
Like
for
literally ask anyone
you know
who
what?
is a logical
Do you
naturalist
admit-
if
do
there is
you
evidence
admit-
of the supernatural.
wait,
they
hang
will-
on. Hang on. Do you admit philosophical naturalism is a faith?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah,
So
I'm happy to say that. I'm not a philosophical naturalist. But it's definitely possible for there to be supernatural.
I'm happy with that. Because you admitted
You're
something.
happy with the
which,
trivial point that is in
New
his
atheists
position?
are not really.
Well done. You are so easily pleased with trivial things. That's amazing. You pat yourself on the back now. You pat yourself on the back with your trivial point that you've got agreement on. Go back into your motte position there, because the Bailey position is utterly overrun at this stage.
really comfortable with.
Sure.
All right, can we move on, or can we just bring someone else on?
Okay, yeah, you guys mentioned, like, the very beginning, Hamza, you were talking about how science and Islam aren't in conflict, and you brought up the fact that many things in science originate in Islam, and I totally agree. Lots of things in science originate in Islam. That's where algebra and arithmetic came from.
Okay, no, the word algebra is just a word. This was used because in Arabic, al-jabr means to tidy up. And this is what happened in Khwarizmi, what he did. So it's just the word that was taken. It is not the concept. Algebra has been around for, 5,000 to 6,000 years. But the word has been taken. The same as a lot of people say Khwarizmi is actually algorithm. No, this is a claim that has never been substantiated. So, and this is the funny thing, T-Jump does it. I used to do that. Because I've been told a lot of times that this is the case, I took it on board without questioning it because it sounded so intuitively correct. And it was not as soon as I started looking into it. Now, T-Jump agrees because he hasn't looked into it. I'm sure that if he would look into it, he would find that it's not.
Can I just repeat what I said? Because you just misquoted me from the off.
Sure.
Okay. I said, from my many discussions on Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, comment section, all these kind of things, Speaker's Corner, whatever it may be, the atheist has this idea that it's science versus Islam. That and what we've demonstrated at the start of the stream was the fact that the foundations of the science.
Excuse me, Hamza, you did not demonstrate, you claimed. That's all you did.
Used today emanated from Islam, from Muslims.
That was a claim.
Ibn Sina and such. Yeah. So the idea that Islam can be against science when it kind of originated the modern science we have today.
Notice the difference?
You accept that particular.
Yeah.
Again, it's very subtle. You've got to pick up on these things quite quickly. There's a difference. So there were certain people, he named them. Then he suddenly said that Islam initiated science. No. If, in fact, if we were charitable, and as you pointed out, and you've done some research, there's few of the Muslims that did anything of substantial value. But even if we granted that for a second, let's grant them the strongest position they have that isn't a fallacy or an equivocation, and that is that there were some amazing, just incredible Muslims that did in fact move science forward in some significant way. That does not mean that Islam did it or that Islam is responsible. That is a non sequitur. One does not follow from the other. Even if the scientists claim that he did, he can't demonstrate that. Even if he said, hey, I've looked at the Quran and it said, investigate the natural world, or that was his flawed understanding of what that particular verse said, that doesn't mean that what his outcome is based on that. Because somebody can investigate the natural world without being told in a book to do it. So the fact that Islam you can't credit Islam, and you can't conflate some Muslims doing something, if we were super charitable, with the ideology. That's a non sequitur. So that's a fallacy. You'd have to demonstrate that that is necessarily the case. And without Islam, it would not have happened. Good luck with that.
Particular point, yeah?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like Islam has made massive contributions to science, like algebra and arithmetic are.
But we're
all
talking about the
invented-
fact, yeah.
Math. Math is
The
part of
method we're
science.
talking about.
Actually, the scientific method itself.
The actual method itself.
That's your
Right.
claim.
Math
Claim.
is
No,
kind of
now it's the
important in
scientific
that.
method
So
again.
Islam invented
Before it
math.
wasn't the
which
whole
is- so yeah,
scientific
it's
method.
huge
No,
for
no,
science.
Muslims did not. Muslims got it from the ancient Hindus, the Brahmins, and these types.
Well,
So
Algebra and arithmetic. So
Yeah.
those were-
the thing is,
No,
we're not
no.
making the claim that from like the Greeks weren't important. The Greeks were super important.
right, I'm
Right.
agreeing with you. I agree that Islam was a
Wait,
huge in science.
Let's go to the fun part. Where do we disagree?
Right. So the disagreement is the genetic fallacy. The fact that Islam made a contributions in making science doesn't mean that there isn't
Muslims,
conflict
Muslims,
between
not Islam.
science and Islam. So the conflict is the fact that because of the way science is now, it does conflict with Islam. There are contradictions in the way, because of how we require evidence in science, that Islam cannot support evidence in that way. Therefore, there is a contradiction between science and Islam. And
Okay, so
science-
first, I would say the genetic fallacy. I would say that's we're not.
Do you hear that? This went right over his head. He hears the word, but doesn't understand how it is being used here. He only hears genetic and he thinks he's on Adam and Eve. And that's not it's if he hears the word evolution, he doesn't understand that you could also have a cosmological evolution and not just biological evolution. He's such a simplistic guy.
We're not making the claim just because Muslims were pivotal in science, therefore science doesn't contradict with Islam in terms of its claims. What we were saying was it doesn't contradict in terms of the flourishment of science and the flourishment which was enhanced by the Islamic values, such as the value of truth and knowledge. And
Oh, it looks I was wrong. It looks
but
like
it does.
I was wrong.
Well, it does conflict because, the
Yeah,
last
it does.
1,000
No,
years.
but I thought he was on Adam and Eve
No, no,
because
no,
it was
no.
genetic. I think
Yeah,
then he
no,
did understand the right way it was meant with
Yeah,
the
no, he wasn't
genes
going Adam and
in
Eve.
Muslim went to Islam.
But the
these types of
flourishing,
things.
the so-called
and-
flourishing, there was a short space of time, a couple of 100 years or whatever the case is, where they were quite, again, if we're going to take this super charitable position that he seems to want to take, there was, but then after that, there was a split and there wasn't any flourishing. Now the question has to be asked, and we've asked it before, were those that flourished under science getting their inspiration
Impetus.
from Islam? And if they were, how do they demonstrate that? And then the people that came along where there was that split, and you remember the names, and I've forgotten them. Why is it that those people were wrong, and you haven't flourished in science for 1,000 years? So who was it that's correct? The fact that you have the split and different people understanding or getting a different idea from Islam should tell you a lot about this. But obviously, it doesn't seem to. You want to go back 1,000 years and claim that that's important, but you're not prepared to accept, the last 1,000 years, because obviously over there, science has been detrimental to your claims, and none of the people there want to accept science. And rightly so, I would say as well. Straightforward reading of the Quran, you don't want to go near science.
Well, there's several problems here. Yes, Baghdad, 1,000 years. There was some sort of, if you want to call it flourish, okay, call it that. There was an era where you had Persian polymaths looking at the achievements of the Greeks and of what was going on at that time in that era. They were able, because they were sitting in the center, to take what came from China, what came from India, what came from the different, from Europe. So from the different places, they were in a very good position to take all this. And what they did, and this is brilliant, they took it, translated it into Arabic, and then advanced it. And this is the contribution that they made, and there's no two ways about it. We were able later, because we also went through this an annihilation phase where the church destroyed everything that was not, in line with Christianity. And we were able to reconstruct everything using the Arabic materials and translate them back into Latin. when this became popular again. And yes, this is why the Arabic texts were useful, and the polymaths at the time, usually from Persia, usually Zoroastrian, so they were not even Muslims, but they're just being taken in. Like Al-Razi hated Islam, and he's always on the list. Look at these Muslims, these brilliant guys. So it doesn't matter whether it's Firnas, whether it's Khwarizmi or Haytham, or it doesn't matter whom you take. Number one, they were not Muslims. Number two, they were not influenced by Islam. And number three, they did not do anything substantial or significant or anything. They just advanced stuff. So those are the three things. The worst thing, though, is that if we go about what Rob just did, if we fast forward 1,000 years and if we look at the clash between Islam and science today, it is significant. Because there's nothing coming out of the OIC countries, the Islam countries, that in any way is on par with what is happening outside of the OIC countries. And this is the huge problem. There's no point in going back 1,000 years if you today are incapable of bringing anything remotely scientifically useful to the table. And that is the problem that I see.
Saving a life is like saving all of mankind. So the values of Islam.
Okay, we don't need to do that.
Yeah, no.
We're talking about Islam doesn't hinder science from that perspective. We weren't saying because Muslims were.
Sure, it does. Of course, it does.
Ask him, do you accept common ancestry or not?
Yeah, and also I think it would be good for us to have a stream of Tijab, and we can give him a little bit. But I suppose he doesn't speak to Muslims that often, and you're right. So he might not know all of those. He's used to dealing with Christians and so forth. But we could always do a stream and go through some of these things and say, okay, have a look at this, that. Because if you come across somebody like Sabur in the future or anybody else, at least you'll have some of that. And don't be too quick to grant that. But even if you granted it, which I can do as well, that still doesn't get them to the position, right? So even if you gave them everything, they still can't get there anyway. But I think it would be good for him to just brush up a little bit on, Islam if he's going to tackle it. You don't have to go deep into it, but just some of these things so that he will be able to push back on that a little bit quicker than he has done here.
Pivotal in science, therefore nothing in science can ever contradict Islam. That's a complete straw man. We never said that.
Wait, I thought Hamza said the whole thing that atheists were saying was that there's a conflict between Islam and science.
Yeah, and
I said the atheists say they have science, we have faith.
Right.
Yeah. Atheists also have faith, though, and Tom admitted that.
I don't have any faith in my position at all. But so if
you do.
Hamza, so when the atheists are saying
faith in the uniformity of nature.
I don't have faith in that at all. That's demonstrable induction. I have induction for that. But
wait. For induction,
you're gonna go off on a tangent now. You should have just ignored him and gone back to Hamza now. He should have gone back. He should have just, when you have those throwaway comments, it's like they're fishing, right? And you just don't take the bait there. You just carry on with Hamza. It's like he's just rambled off something. You just carry on with Hamza there because Hamza made the claim and he should be doing that. And he's jumping in here and throwing stuff out there. And when he says his position is demonstrable, now he's going to go down the position of, hey, well, can you show that it's true in any absolute sense or something like that, or allude to that, right? Once you go down that, you're just going down a rabbit hole that's not going to be helpful for either party. So I think just keeping that claim to yourself, when you just hear that, you go, yeah, whatever, and carry on with Hamza, because that quote is thrown out there designed to take you off track.
Function metaphysically, you have to have a belief in the uniformity of nature.
No, you don't.
So you don't believe in the uniformity of nature?
No, there are actually many laws of nature that have changed over time. You don't.
No. From laws of nature, or what we perceive to be laws, them changing, ontologically, the existence of a uniformity of nature. You don't think?
Uniformity of nature means that if something happens somewhere, it happens everywhere. You cannot go and simply, well, you can go and assert it and you can do it on faith, but you can never demonstrate it. You can never test it. It's an assumption that you are making. I would say, no, that is not the case because I have no reason to believe it. If you believe this, okay, that's cool, but we don't know what is happening. We don't know of the forces inside a black hole. We don't know any of that. So we can't say that this uniformity, this concept,
I think that
is actually correct.
I think the route, because Tom took the bait here now, it's going down the route it's not going to be very helpful here. And in a sense, obviously, I'm agreeing with Tom in the following sense, but I think the way it was phrase, and the fact that he took the bait wasn't particularly helpful here. We do presuppose these things, and we have reasons. So faith is believing things without good reasons and evidence. We presuppose the uniformity of nature because we've seen that work in the past and it works now. We can't guarantee it will work in the future, but we have good reasons to believe it will. Now, if you translate that to God, we don't have anything in the past or the present that demonstrates or points toward a God that would say, hey, we have good reasons to believe that will be the case in the future. So I think there is that presupposition. You're right. We don't know what's going on in a black hole, but we are presupposing that things act in a law-like way and there's regularities there because we've seen that in the past. And as Tom said, that's induction. It's not a deductive thing, but it is inductive, and that's how science operates. And we don't have a problem. But to call that faith, of course, is entirely disingenuous, and no academic and nobody,
and that's the point,
any serious person would take that. So that's just, him claiming straw man. See, everything that he claims, he does himself. It's irony, right? If you pay attention, every single claim that Sabur says of his opponent, he invokes himself. And I'm now convinced that he doesn't even realize that he's doing it. He is so cognitively dissident here that he doesn't even realize that he's doing it. But he will quite happily point it out in what he thinks is his interlocutors, and he's mistaken in any case. But in fact, he's doing the exact same thing.
You have faith in that?
Right. If it changes, it's not uniform.
No, we're not talking about our understanding of our theories, which change all the time.
Oh, yeah, you're right. So, like, for example, gravity. Right, I understand what you're saying. So gravity itself used to be repulsive at the early stages of the universe.
Again, we're not talking about our view. We're not talking about
I understand.
We're talking about ontologically, metaphysically.
Yes,
that there is the uniform. You're saying you don't believe that?
Correct. Gravity literally changed. It was not the same all the time throughout all the time.
Tom, I don't think you understand me. We're talking
let him run clarify. Let him run clarify because.
The physical force of gravity.
So Tom, just want to make that point, Tom. So,
oh God,
the point that this is similar to the point that I was making earlier. So now you're saying that did the reality of gravity change, or did the idea about gravity change?
At the beginning of the universe, gravity was repulsive; it pushed things away, and now it's attractive, so it pulls things together. So gravity literally, physically, ontologically changed from the early universe to today. The laws of nature have changed over time, ontologically.
Just stop for a second there, Stop. So I just want to make a small point there. That's certainly one prediction of what's his name with eternal inflation. I just can't think of his name. I can see his face. Sean Carroll referred to him in his debate with Craig. He's quite well known in the cosmological community.
Was it Guth Border-Valenkin?
That's right, Alan Guth. Thank you. So that's Alan Guth's position that gravity was repulsive in the early universe, and in fact that hypothesis did solve some problems. Other people disagree with that. I don't know if it's the majority accepted position, but it's certainly a hypothesis of the early universe, and it would explain certain things that there weren't an explanation for. So it was a hypothesis that explained certain things, or did bring them did give us an explanation for things. But that doesn't necessarily mean that ontologically it was the case. It's simply a hypothesis. So I think we just got to tweak that with Tom there. But I think the bigger point is that we do presuppose regularities in nature. And if there's something that doesn't, and we put forward hypothesis like gravity is repulsive, for example, then that would be something that would be, different from what we currently experience. But we would be led there through our current regularities in nature. So going down this route and trying to defend this all ended up because he took debate with Sabur about the faith thing. Or atheists have faith. You just got to ignore that, or deal with that and put it to bed much quicker, because I think it's going to deteriorate here. And unfortunately, this wasn't helpful going down this route, as we'll see now.
Yeah. And we've got another intellectual giant in here, Akko. Don't hide yourself, okay? Why would you presuppose that we're hiding ourselves? Why do you say debate them? What makes you say we have not debated them in the live stream? What makes you say all these things? Why are you being such an idiot who presupposes that none of this has happened when all of this has happened, when all of this has already gone down? We have ridiculed them, and they are now so afraid that we are no longer allowed to join them. And I have this on video that Hamza said, I'm no longer allowed there because he's too scared, because he's afraid that I'm too much of a Islamophobe and therefore I'm not allowed. So before you talk shit, first ask, have you ever talked to them? Yes, we have invited all of them to talk to them, but they are too scared and they are running away from us. That is why we are not on this live stream, this particular one, because they are too scared. I just want to bring that out there. Sorry about that.
So I just want to understand this. So in your is everything in your stream of consciousness uniform?
No, I don't know what you mean.
What?
So
Oh shit.
let's take a part of the universe that you're not in at the moment. Is it the same? Is it let's say the other side of the planet, for example? Is it under the same physical laws that the part of the planet that you're on in your stream of
Mostly
consciousness?
yes, but some parts no.
Is it the
That's
same?
kind of the point of relativity, is that they're relative. The laws of physics are relative to your perspective in that case. So no.
So, and that's just you're making a little sort of just a squeak at saying no, but actually what you mean is that there's nothing substantially different between somebody, let's say Tom X on the other side of the planet having their experience of the universe, and you on your side of the experience of this planet having your experience. Is there any change in the physical laws for them? So let's say the relativity in terms of where you are compared to the other side of the thing out of it. Is the universe different over there in terms of its laws than it is here?
No, it would be different past in the time frame, not in the current time frame.
Sure. So that's the point of it being uniform. So can we spread that out across the universe?
No.
No,
don't know
we can't,
this.
because there are certain cases where the laws of physics can and do change.
Exactly.
So if you're traveling through the universe, are the laws of physics changing for you as you're traveling?
Yes.
Depending on your location, yes. So the laws of physics.
Give me an example.
A wormhole.
Like if we could travel faster than the speed of light and go back in time, we could go to the point in time where gravity was repulsive, like at the Big Bang. Like that's the one I know of. But there are other cases where.
So I want you to talk about now. If you're traveling through the universe, will you travel through a region of the universe where the laws of physics are different from where you were, say, before?
Sure,
Yes.
if I went through a black hole.
Exactly. Thank you.
Yeah. So this is proving the point. Because what you're doing is you're looking for the most esoteric out there theory to put forward as a possible explanation for an out.
No.
What reality is that universe is uniform. You're trying to look for those exceptions.
Just stop it there for a second. I mean, I'm not. I wouldn't go down this route that Tom is going down, but okay, he's gone down there. But he's provided an example. So Imran questioned him on whether he thinks that the laws of physics change under certain conditions. Thomas brought up an example of a black hole. And then Imran's response is, because, in fact, he probably either accepts or kind of has an idea that could be the case, he tacitly admits that the example has been brought, which was the point, right? Because they were challenging him. No. You got to presuppose it. He says, no, you don't. Like I say, I wouldn't go down this route myself, but he's gone down it. Now, when he brings up an example that is in fact the case or likely to be the case, and Imran doesn't have a response, he then says, you brought up the most esoteric out there example. He only has to bring up an example that you can't deny, and he's made the point. And then you say, well, now your critique is an esoteric example. I mean, this is just such poor reasoning, and again, very disingenuous, right? All he has to do is bring up any example to refute your claim that the laws of physics must be uniform in all places at all times. And if he's done that, then he's done it, right? And for you to then turn around and say, well, you bring an out there example, it's logically possible that's the case, and that's all he needs. I appreciate that would probably go over Imran's head, but he's now being disingenuous, and in fact not conceding the point tells me it's bordering on being dishonest.
I mean, how long does it take a photon to get from the center of the sun to the outside? I mean, we're talking hundreds of thousands of years, and there's lots of things. I don't know. This uniformity is weird.
If I went back to when the Big Bang, when the inflation initially happened, the circumstances might have been different. Or if I went through a black hole, maybe some.
He's just admitted that it was different.
That's the point. That's what Tom's point was, even though I don't agree with going down that route with Tom. That was his point, right? So, and now you've conceded that you've literally said it out of your own mouth. But then you can't say, well, oh, that's bad because it's out there examples. There are examples that are logically possible, and that's all Tom needs, and probably even, not just logically possible, but physically possible, and that's all Tom needs to refute the point that you're trying to pin him on, which is that the laws of physics are uniform at all places and all times. I mean, that
thing would be different within the black hole. Now, you're being asked a very straightforward question, which you're sort of trying to slip through, is the universe uniform? Now, that's an assumption within.
I don't know why does he say you're trying to slip through? He made a very, very clear statement, gave examples, showed different possibilities, and you're still saying he's trying to slip through. What the fuck do you want?
Okay. Yeah,
science. If it was.
Stop. But in this point, you've got to stop Imran, and then again, remember, like I was saying, right? You realize with his response that either it's dishonesty or he's just not tracking at all, and I'm not. I'm not sure which is. But then in my mind, I'm going, okay, how can I explain this to him such that a child who was sitting next to him would go, I understand that, right? So now you've got to stop this and go, okay, Imran, your claim was that there's a uniformity in nature, in the laws of physics and so forth. Tom's claim was, no, there wasn't. And he only needs one example that is logically or even physically possible to refute your claim that everything is uniform, because the claim is everything's uniform. One example of it not being uniform refutes the claim that everything is uniform. So he's done that. So Imran, can you see now that I've given one? I only need one quote out there example that is logically or physically possible to refute your claim. Unless you can refute this and say no, but the laws of physics would be uniform in a black hole or at the beginning of the universe, I have refuted your claim. And now for you to turn around and shift the goalpost and say, well, hey, it's an out there example and you're trying to slip through. No, all I'm doing is bringing up one example because, Imran, that's all I need. Do you understand that? Do you accept that I only need one example? I don't need to bring you 50 million. Your claim was everything. As soon as there's one thing that isn't, the claim of everything is refuted. Do you now understand, Imran, why only one claim is necessary? Say it. Now, anybody who's listening to my voice and what I've just said there, you'd either have to be retarded or you haven't yet reached the cognitive ability to understand and put together those logical sentences.
Well, I can see three people in front of me who can't or don't, or I don't know. What is the boy doing? Is he learning about the difference between methodological and philosophical naturalism? He's not there anymore. He's reading something.
Wasn't, then what's the point of your experiment? Because what could be true for you in this player part of the universe would be false for you in another part of the universe.
Yeah, it's generally the same in many cases. It doesn't need to be perfectly the same. So
so we agree then. That's the point that was being made.
No,
Did
because
you notice the subtle shift there now? Notice
Yeah.
the subtle shift there. Now he's gone on to the claim of, okay, well, if you do an experiment, how do you know that the experiment is giving you valid data because somewhere else in the universe it may not be? Well, that's now a separate claim. But the original claim was that everything is uniform, or the laws of physics are what's the word? Consistent, or whatever the word may be there. Now it's a subtle change, right? Not acknowledging that his first claim was refuted. But yes, it might be the case, as Tom is saying, that, hey, if we were to say that, light can only go, the speed of light, but in the black hole, it may be different. Maybe that light accelerates beyond 300,000 kilometers per second in the black hole. So in that particular case, we would have to withhold our view because we don't know there. But in other circumstances where we generally look around, we can make general claims, which are what we would use for an inference for inductive method. So there's no problem here, but he subtly changed. So you've got to be very careful because these guys don't concede a point. They subtly move on to another point, and then you've got to call them out on the original point. Don't let them get away with doing that, slipping through like they have here. And then, ironically, making a claim that Tom's being slippery.
Assumption that it's always been the same and can't change. Like, no,
no
change.
one's making that. No one's making that statement.
are.
Okay,
Yes, you
so
are.
then,
You made that
we
claim.
wouldn't disagree. It can change. So I don't assume it's uniform at all.
To make it easier, Tom, do you believe science has presuppositions?
It depends on your worldview.
So
Some of my hair.
wait, hang on.
Yes.
So for science to actually function, you need maths, you need logic,
Maths is not a Okay.
do you need testimony? Yeah, do you admit that?
No.
Math and logic, yes, those aren't presuppositions.
Exactly.
No, as in you need science can't prove logic, can't prove mathematics.
It's
It
not
can't
there.
These are all
prove
trivial
Logic.
points.
Yeah.
the
Okay, stop there
testimony
again.
being a
So
root of
now we've gone back to getting his interlocutor to agree to trivial points. Okay, these are trivial if you understand anything. Yes, science does have presuppositions. There's certain things you presuppose in order to do science. That's not debatable. Well, almost not debatable by anybody. Most people accept that anyway. So why are we going to a trivial point here? In fact, he was dealing with Imram, and now Sabur has come in with trivial points again. This is his motte position again. Hey, I'm going to get you to agree with trivial points and go, thank you for agreeing with something that is either irrelevant or is insubstantial. And then I'm going to pat myself on the back because I don't realize that what I've said is insubstantial. But my audience will nod along like gullible sheep and go, wow, look at that amazing point Sabur made, not realizing that it's entirely trivial.
And Rob, I need to correct you. I'm sorry. He's actually talking to Hamza.
Who is? Sorry.
Tom was actually answering Hamza's question when the others butted in, but that was a long time ago.
Oh, yeah. So, but now he was just
Knowledge.
talking with Imran. Yeah.
So science needs these other things for it to function. Do you admit that?
Yes, those aren't presuppositions, though.
No, but you need them to do science,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And do you also believe that for us to be able to do science, we have to have a mind which can actually arrive at truth?
Oh my God. No. Why do you need a mind that can arrive at truth? You need a mind. And then you follow it, and then you go wherever then the experiments or wherever science leads you. I don't know why you don't need to presuppose truth.
No, not necessarily.
You don't believe that?
Well, no, because fallibilism, you don't actually need truth in that case.
Exactly.
But I don't see your point. So yes, we do need
Thank
math
you.
and logic for sure. We need a mind that functions to some degree.
For us, and I mentioned this earlier on,
Okay, stop there for a second. I'm going to tell you where this is going to go now, right? There's
so
a mind
easy,
that
huh?
has to. Okay, there's a
Yeah.
mind that has to value truth. In an atheistic world, you have no grounds
don't
to,
have the values,
to
yeah,
value
yeah.
truth. Now defend that. So let me go off on a tangent here, because Imran was in big trouble there. So I'm gonna divert this now onto another point that I think I've got a gotcha for on atheists, which is you don't have a basis for valuing truth. Oh, what I really mean when I put under pressure is you don't have an intrinsic basis for valuing truth as opposed to a instrumental or a pragmatic value. And now I can pat myself on the back.
we value truth. We not only
No,
can
you
we
don't.
arrive at truth, we also value truth.
No, you
Sure.
don't.
And all of these things, in essence, you can't justify using science. You can't use science to justify maths, logic, or the value of truth or testimony of these.
Well, Sabur, I don't know if you realize, have you ever tried cleaning your windows using a hammer? You can't do that. So is that the fault of the hammer now? Where is your problem?
No,
The
but-
hammer
but-
was not built to clean windows. Why are you now suddenly saying that another tool that was built for another purpose is supposed to be like the jack of all trades? It doesn't work like that.
Well, what he's saying, though,
Unbelievable.
Stops. What he's saying is that you can't use science to justify the presuppositions of science. That's
Yeah,
trivially
exactly.
true. But that's trivially true, right? So that's not a substantial point. Again, this is a trivial point that virtually everybody accepts. So why bring this up?
Things, right? These are all things which come together, and then you use that to build a scientific case.
Okay, next.
Sure, but those aren't presuppositions. Like I don't
Exactly.
presuppose
Well,
math and
I
logic.
think you need presuppositions from the perspective that prerequisites. I think that would be a better.
Sure,
term.
there's lots of prerequisites to science.
Yeah.
Science isn't
So,
self-contained.
what I'm really trying to get at is to challenge the idea of scientism, that science being the only way of knowledge.
Right, I'm not a science. I don't adhere
A
to
complete
scientism.
non
No,
sequitur.
that's great. That's great. That's good.
A complete
Okay.
non sequitur. Thank you for bringing up a trivial point again.
If you believe in scientism, because
Oh yeah, no,
scientism
definitely. You can have knowledge.
is something,
Hey,
is
let me just
something
stop
which
you right there. Just stop it for 1 sec. Hey, Sabur, let me just ask you, do you accept what Hitler did? Because I just want to make sure that you don't accept Nazism. Okay, great. Thank you very much. Oh, brilliant. Thank you, Sabur. Oh, I'm glad you agreed with that. Thank you so much. Okay, let's move on now. So I've just given a rebuttal now. Does anybody think that I made any substantial point in any way related to the original topic? I'm just using
going to ask,
reductio ad absurdum here to show how ridiculous that point was.
I was just going to ask, listen, are you aware that in the Southern Hemisphere they're going into summer now? I mean, is that something that you have to presuppose? It's just as irrelevant and trivial as everything else.
Is quite prevalent. I'm actually happy. I'm actually happy you're an atheist who doesn't believe in scientism.
Yeah, essentially no science.
Excuse me?
We're so excited that you're happy. I mean, making you happy is what we live for. So thank you for explaining your emotional state, because that's incredibly important to us in what would otherwise be a rational or intellectual discussion.
Yeah, but he is now insinuating that every atheist is also a victim of scientism.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we don't take his claims particularly seriously because he can't justify any of them. So, it's just another one of those throwaway claims. I mean, I'd ask him,
Scientists or
where's your
philosophers
evidence for that? But hey,
accept scientism anymore. We accept that there are kinds of knowledge, like conceptual knowledge, things that are true that we can know just by thinking about it.
We still have, we still have popular cultural scientism, right?
So fucking
Yeah, sure. I don't really follow the popular culture stuff, so I don't really know much about that.
Yeah, but it is something we should challenge because.
All right, finally we've agreed on something. Tom, I'm going to choke you off now. Going to let this other I am a new atheist on now.
But just do I have your permission to copy again?
What's that?
Do I have your permission to copy this onto my channel again?
Yeah, I don't mind.
Oh, thanks. All right, thanks, guys. Talk to you later.
Thanks, dude.
all right, let's stop it there.
need to
That's
ask
a
for
good time to
permission
to
to
an end.
copy yourself onto your channel now?
Well, he asked, right? And Hamza had no problem with this. Just as a side note, right? When in the next discussion, which hopefully we'll get to at some point, when Ask Yourself and Jack Angstreich came on with hijab, and that went poorly for hijab as well. Ask Yourself put it on his channel, and Hamza put a copyright strike against him, and it was removed because Hamza said he didn't have the right to do it. So in Hamza's world, you've got to ask permission in order to do so. Obviously, we aren't, but we're critiquing it. So Ask Yourself turned around and said, no problem, I'm just going to put it up again, but now I'm going to put it up with critique. Because he put it up pretty much without critique, and then he and Jack Angstreich spoke at the very end of the whole thing. So he just let it play through because that was the part that he was interested in. And like I say, he's a dog with a bone, right? He's the perfect interlocutor for these guys because he just wouldn't let a claim go. As soon as somebody makes a claim, he's on it with a dog as a bone, and he won't let it go to the point where they'd kick him off because they wouldn't be able to proceed any further, and they wouldn't be able to justify it properly, and then people just get tired and they kick him off, right? So he's very good at doing that, and he'd be particularly effective against these guys who make claims and are never held to account for their claims. So that's also just the point that because he did this copyright strike. So hopefully Ask Yourself will put that up with critique, but like what we're doing here.
The thing is, he also speaks very slowly and very quietly and very softly. This would drive them insane. Okay.
Who does that? Sorry.
I don't know.
How much?
This Jack Angstrom guy.
Oh yeah. He's well. I mean, he can get on his high horse as well. I think he was very charitable in that discussion, but I've seen him let go at people, like even more than you might do. So he's done that a few times, but he definitely didn't do it. No, you haven't come across it. Oh, I've seen him, just lay into people on occasions, but it's not always the case. And I think he has to probably get the hang that he thinks that somebody's talking complete nonsense, and he's spoken to them multiple times, and then he'll just lay into them. But Ask Yourself is much more, blunt and, upfront with the very first person he speaks to, even if he's never spoken to before. If he thinks they're dodging, he just goes after them.
This is interesting. Thank you, Yakasa, for these. It's important, especially for new ex-Muslims. That's very interesting. I never thought of it like that. But it's true because it shows an ex-Muslim, especially if they've recently decided, no, let me give this a try, that there are answers to these guys where the apologists are always trying to push doubt into doubt, telling ex-Muslims, are you sure you want to do that? Are you sure you want to risk this? And coming up with these kind of questions. And what we are doing is we're showing how ridiculous they really are, because a lot of people are really stumped by this. And this is,
Yeah, so we hope, anyway. I mean, that's the end of it. I don't think we're going to do any more at the end there. they bring
Well,
on some
there's
Muslim.
not much to go. I mean, because
There's still quite a
you
lot there.
atheists can't get the mic to work. Ahmed just says he's neutral, and because here I have all my comments, and there's not a lot going there. I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
should we do a separate show on this?
Yeah, we can do. I mean, I didn't think there
Because
was
this
a
is
lot
very
of
short,
value.
and there's very like nearly nothing that they.
Yeah,
There's
so
nothing
that's why I don't think
substantial
it's
here.
super valuable to do a whole nother show on that, because the main stuff has been said here, and they'll just be talking like in an echo
I
chamber
know
anyway.
Abdulaziz. He made some good points here.
Oh, okay. I mean, we could do a separate show if you want on that one. Yeah, I think I need to get some rest now, and I'm outside in the car, so I'm pretty chilly.
Okay. All right. So then let me put here. We stopped on 334.
So my final thoughts on this, before we wrap it up here, is again, I think we've exposed some of the tactics, the disingenuousness, but also the cognitive dissonance and the inability to grasp certain concepts or certain ideas or whatever the case is, both by Sabur and Imran in particular. Hamza didn't really get involved too much here, although he seems to kind of not really be following, because he'll ask a question about something that's already been clearly answered. It wasn't as if it was opaque or anything like that. It's been like transparent answers. Then he'll come back and ask a question. Fortunately, he didn't do it too often in this show. But I think, again, if you go back and listen to this, you'll see where we've kind of exposed either the disingenuous or bordering on dishonest responses, or the fact that there's just not a cognitive ability to understand certain concepts. And again, it tells us a lot about the interlocutors, because, more advanced ones, and I have seen some, I haven't seen them with Muslims. Not to say that it's not possible. I just haven't come across any. But there are certain Christians that are at a much higher level than this, right? They won't bring up trivial points. They won't go after hypotheticals, because they realize there's a point being made. They'll direct their critique at the point being made, certain things like this. So it's these certain things that will tell you about the level of your interlocutor. And I think what we've noticed here, and what I've become more convinced, is that the level of these interlocutors is at a much lower level. I actually gave them a bit more credit than I think is due. And again, having gone through this now and recognizing certain patterns of certain things that come up, it is for me now clear that they don't accept hypotheticals correctly. They don't understand what the point of a hypothetical is, and certain other things just sort of goes over the head, or they're not really that clued up. And the fact that Sabur can read something multiple times and not have an understanding himself, and then mistakenly, if I could be charitable, thinking that it's his interlocutor that doesn't understand, just tells me that the understanding there is very poor. So I think that's kind of my summary of this. So hopefully it's been useful and valuable, and I'll leave it to Stops to have the last word.
And I agree. Watch this. This is good fun. No, there's not much that I can add, because this is exactly it. I'm very happy that somebody pointed out today that we are helping, and especially the ex-Muslims, something I didn't even consider. So thank you for that. And if you want us to do something, just let us know. And otherwise, just give us a thumbs up, like the video. And I don't know, do you still have a Patreon account?
Yeah, I think I do somewhere. I don't know if
do
it's
the
active,
super
but I'd have
chat,
to have a look.
and if you want to donate 10,000 so Rob can buy himself a heater for the car, absolutely welcome. Go into, I don't know, what is there a limit on super chat? I don't even know.
Yeah,
Was it?
$99, I think it is, or £99.
Oh,
But again, we're not asking for
didn't
that
David
amount.
Wood do like a 500
Oh
or
no,
something?
you're right. He did $500 or something, right? So maybe
I
there
think,
is a much
yeah.
higher limit. Yeah, maybe that's true. I mean, my thing Stops. I don't know about you, but if I could stop doing everything else, and I did this professionally to refute these guys left, right, and center all the time, and I spent all my time doing this and reading the Quran deeply and philosophy and stuff, I'd do that, and I think I'd be pretty much a force to be reckoned with. So I just do this in my spare time, listening to the bits I
Yeah,
can.
same here,
My
yeah.
only claim to fame, well, not even claim to fame, but my only claim that I make is that I've got a fair amount of critical thinking. I don't claim to have, degrees or anything like that, but I can, assess claims at a reasonable level and recognize where I see fallacies. But that takes time to learn, and I'm still in that process. I don't claim to be, the be all and end all. There's things that I'll miss either, in a live conversation or even in these sort of things. But that would be something I'd do, full time. I would be the counter apologetics, spearhead that for sure. If I, could make 5 or 10 grand a month and just focus my time on doing videos, critiques, shows, all that sort of stuff. I do it, but
That'd be fun.
you and I could do that, and yeah, I think then that we do okay with this. We're not claiming that we're the world's best, but if we had the time, we'd be a force to be reckoned with. I'd take a lot more time to do stuff. I would have more time to do it, and then my critiques would be probably even 10 times stronger than they are now.
Okay, guys, thank you very much. Thanks for joining us. Thank you for being interested in what we're saying. So this is really nice. And we're going to continue tomorrow evening, same spot, right? Same time, same spot.
Tomorrow I've got a date night, so I'm going to be doing that. But I will definitely be back on Friday evening with the Gin and Tonic show. We've got a couple of videos that Stops and I didn't get to. Tune in on Friday after 8 p.m. Hopefully we'll get to that. We didn't get to it last time. If we have Muslim guests, it's sometimes difficult. But there's a couple of interesting ones there, and that will be from Speaker's Corner if we go ahead with those. Stops will make the call on that, but there'll be some interest in there that you'll see as well.
Okay, guys. See you 2 days. Good night. Goodbye.
Good night.